Hello and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. We've got a very exciting show here today with Johnny, Jason Story, and Yorai all joining me to talk about AI Unite, a new game, and a couple other really interesting topics, including Johnny's announcement of his talk at GameDev Guild. You mentioned right before we started that you have come up with the session, so going to tell everybody what that is and tell me what it is, because I'm just finding out right now too.
Yeah. So I did the talk at the Game Dev Guild last year. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was basically using the power of dots in your existing Unity mono behaviors project. And then I've been thinking for like such a long time to like figure out what I wanted to do for this year. Like I've literally been like since like January, just like had it like in the back of my head and like doing brainstorming, and I could never really like figure out something that I wanted to, but I finally have something, and I'm freaking amped. I'm really excited for this topic. So the topic is going to be announced at the end of this live stream, so we can get Jason that sweet audience retention.
Well played. Well played.
Yeah.
Well played.
That was not planned, and I was not expecting that. Well, I will give one quick announcement that I won't save till the end. With the Game Dev Guild, we are going to do another one of the pre-event mixer meetup things, just like we did last year, but we're going to do this one next Saturday. We're going to have a live event in Gather. People will be able to come, hang out, chat with each other. I want to try to put on a couple quick live sessions, maybe possibly a little roundtable on AI. I think that would be pretty interesting, and I've got one other thing in mind, and do some mastermind group matchmaking. So if anybody's interested in that, you can check it out. There's a link in the description and all that. Anyway, there's a lot more going on this week, though. There was an announcement, or quite a few announcements. I want to dive into the first one, though, which was at the beginning of the list, the Unite Amsterdam one. Have you guys all seen that? Everybody knows Amsterdam is the next destination in November, which I'm sure is probably better for the left side of my screen, right?
So I've watched the next Unite being announced, like the page, but I'm like, do I go there? Because it's relatively close, I think, but I always find myself nervous to go to these events.
Oh, why is that?
Well, just the idea of traveling, really. But I know that there are like a lot of really good things exposed there, but I don't know if like outside of connections, which are great to have, is there any tangible value in watching the presentations on a big screen with a lot of noise around you, as opposed to having it like available in clean video format?
There's only one, and that's right after the talk. It's the end of the presentation, the 20 to 40 minutes that you get to just sit there and pick the brain of the speaker on all of the stuff that they didn't get into that was either too advanced or just not kind of relevant to everybody. So that's kind of the core of it. Outside of that, and it's the connections. It's the meeting people and coming across and seeing things that you wouldn't have normally seen, just because you're kind of forced to be exposed and kind of explore and see a lot more stuff. So yeah, but that's a fair point. But you are close, and Story's pretty close too. So I expect there's at least some chance that
I'm subscribed at least to the newsletter. I haven't decided if I'm going, but I have signed up on the list, so we're getting there. I'm slightly closer.
That's fair. What about you, Johnny?
Yeah, definitely interested in it. Obviously, it's like still a little bit of a ways out, so we'll just kind of have to see how things shake out. But I definitely would want to go out to Amsterdam. It seems like a great place, and it would be a good excuse to go hang out there.
Yeah.
Also, you now have your 20,000 subscribers, so you can be in that club.
The 20,000 subscriber high club.
Yeah, of course you have that.
So the only downside for me is that it's only 2 days long, so I have to like find something else to do while I'm out there, like drop by Ireland and say hello. And it's like I don't know where else is on the way. That's like on the way to Amsterdam, right? It's like fly by there and then continue.
It is for me, It's part of the trip.
It is in the map on my head, at least. I don't know. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. If anybody is going in chat, yeah, drop a comment and let us know. I'm kind of curious to see if people are planning on going, especially people who are out there where it's close. Like I said, I'm still heavily considering it, though. I think it'd be a lot of fun, even if it's only 2 days long. And it'll be a chance to go to Amsterdam, where I have definitely never been. So I wanted to. There are a lot of things I want to talk about. I feel like AI is going to take up a big chunk of it, so I want to save that for a little bit later and talk about one of the other big topics that I had, which was the game that just came out yesterday. That I did a very fun, somewhat long interview with the developers yesterday, or that's coming out after this. I can't get my words out, but the Spellcraft came out, and it's a game built by a bunch of industry pros that have been around for a long time, working on a lot of different games that you've probably heard of, League of Legends and StarCraft and all kinds of stuff like that. And they've been putting this thing together for the last couple of years, and I've been able to have access to it because I had a friend there that let me in and been NDA'd and couldn't talk about it for the longest time. They've gone through a couple different versions of the game, and the first ones were okay. It was like a decent game, but nothing that really like super stuck and caught my attention. The latest version, though, I got an early access version of it, played it a little bit, and was like, this is really a lot of fun. And I asked my friend if I could interview the developers to just kind of talk about the process. And I thought it was a very interesting conversation, talking about building out the more of the competitive setup for building out a bigger game that has to be competitive and scale to millions of players, which is not a problem that a lot of people have to deal with. So I was just curious. Well, I don't even know if I was curious. I was curious. Have you guys seen this? I assume not, because it just got released and announced yesterday. And have you guys have any thoughts about building these kinds of games? This is like more of an asynchronous, team fight tactics style plus a MOBA kind of mixed in together. You guys, I just kind of want to open it up.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about that. I specifically had like a whole gigantic rant with my friends back when TFT launched, specifically because people were talking about how it's going to generate many clones, and I kind of played devil's advocate on why clones wouldn't work much back in the day. So my first thought back when TFT launched was that game mode only worked as well as it did because it relied on the existing franchise, and they used all of the character thematics, all of the built-up existing world of lore to bring in things you like, because you can't care about a unit if you haven't like learned about how it exists. And League of Legends had like a gigantic established universe where like Lux can do her laser, and there's Garen and all the known characters.
I felt exactly the same way, and I was never even into the lore, just into the gameplay and the ability. So keep going, but I just want to let you know, like that was something I 100% felt the same. I was like, I only like this because of this, and I wouldn't like something that tried to do this where I didn't know the characters.
Yeah, so in the first iteration of TFT, they had like a lot of characters that were very clearly defined into buckets that you could like predict based on your knowledge of the existing characters, and that helped a lot in picking up the game, actually understanding what is going on, and like getting an idea of what you're gonna get out of a character that you're like picking up and putting on the board. And I thought that a lot of games can't do that because, first off, you're going to see like a bunch of units fighting on a board. Okay, great, but you don't know anything about them, and it's like, you can learn the mechanics, but it's going to be way harder to pick up. So I figured that like TFT clones wouldn't do nearly as well. But then some games kind of proved me wrong. I'm failing to remember the names of them, but like it became a whole scene, and some did succeed, which was honestly really nicely surprising. So there is that aspect. And then the aspect of auto battlers, I was actually really hooked on the idea, because it's like, look at that. It's probably so easy to calculate. You can do like a ton of things that are like, just set up a simulation starter and press go and see how it ends up, like the game of life in a sense, but like more mechanics, of course. So like that part seemed really fun to develop. And for a time, I actually like toyed around with coding my own version of that, but something that would be more active. And then I kind of played TFT more, and I realized you can actually drop items mid-match. And I had like, this is probably hell to sync, but they already have all their technology of like League of Legends prediction and backtracking. If things like need to change, like based on how you placed it, if there's lag, etc. So that was like, I wanted that in order to make something that like feels up to enough quality. So I just gave up because I was using Unity at the time, and we didn't have like reliable dots that I could like say, yeah, actually snapshot that entire frame.
So it's interesting because when I talk to them, and this is all in the interview, people can watch it later when it comes out. They were talking about how initially they started with dots. They were using an early version of dots. And then what they ended up doing was switching away to just a pure like ASP.NET style solution where it's just an API call that's super scalable that takes in to basically just pass in some integers for your inputs and then have the game simulate completely outside of Unity on the server and then send it back up. And they said that it was essentially just it ended up being easier, more scalable, and very simple for that type of game. And it makes sense for that type of game. It's just because you're placing your units and then you're telling it when to use an ability. Like your actions are like use this ability on this unit or on this hex. So you're sending an ability ID and a hex. Probably that's it. I don't even know if they send a unit or target because it's probably just the hex that they send and then that's it. And it simulates, and I think it is very interesting how they went about it to make sure that they could actually scale it up too. Because they're talking about they could have done it the dots way and it was kind of working, but getting that to be scalable at the same level was not nearly as easy as just doing an API call.
Yeah. In regards to the whole reliability aspect, it's something that I feel like is really crucial when you're doing like a real-time gameplay against other people. But the problem with that is that you have to like replicate entire states, and the more complex your game is, the harder it is to maintain states. People talk a lot about how like card games are the easiest because they're mostly turn-based, so there's like no stress of that ever happening. And there's also other games that are like at really slow pace, and you can use like buffering inputs into the future and making sure nobody exceeds like a certain threshold of time. Those things work, but they're never as fun as something you can do like in real time with a snap. But the problem is to replicate a state and going back if something went like divergent, like you're getting input from the past that should have actually impacted whether your character is alive or dead, and your character having been alive actually made you use an attack, so now that attack has to not exist. A lot of that has like a lot of headaches in order to properly solve as your game gets more complex. So there isn't a good way to handle that in modern engines, as far as I am aware, which is why whenever I reach that part in my thinking, I tend to give up if I'm working on something alone. Yeah,
Definitely not a good built-in way. What about you, Jason and Johnny? Any thoughts on this one?
I was thinking it reminds me of a game I played when I was younger. There was a game, Magic the Gathering Battlegrounds, which I really loved because for that one it was very much a map, but it had the same real-time sort of combat going on. I quite liked it had a very token-based thing where you're sort of accruing points and building an army and fighting back and forth. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm not familiar with a lot of these kinds of games franchises because I don't really play them that much. I'm very much a single story driven game kind of person, but I do find it fascinating to see the trends in the industry and how things change. So it's not really my area, but I do, like I said, I like those kinds of puzzly type games. So it might, who knows, I might give it a try.
Yeah, I definitely recommend trying it out, and they've simplified it down a lot. Like one of the things Jorai was mentioning was knowing the characters being super important, and I know that in the earlier versions of it, there were like some ridiculous number of characters, and it was impossible for me to have any idea like why is this tank slightly better or different than this other tank that's slightly different than these other three. Now there are, I think, 9 characters, and they're very distinct, and it's pretty obvious like you can build different types of combinations of your 3 people with those 9 characters and come up with weird different combinations that kind of mix and match and played a lot more interestingly than at least in the past. So it was a lot more approachable too. I don't know. It's fun stuff. Hey, Johnny.
Yeah, no,
I didn't
these
really say
games
anything.
I feel like they just like look pretty simple. It's just like a board with a couple characters on them, but like there's something that kind of like makes you think like, oh, this is actually there's a lot of like complexity going on kind of under the hood. So it's definitely like something kind of interesting to consider. I haven't really played any of these games. I'm not like really familiar with kind of how they all work and everything like that. But you know, I've kind of seen some and like kind of considered, you know, like what might this kind of thing look like on like, you know, a really large scale if we like, you know, really scale this up to be, you know, auto battling a bunch of units. And I don't know, it's just kind of like something that I was considering a little bit at one point, but hadn't really explored that all too much. But that is super interesting to hear that this game was like originally built off of dots and then they kind of moved away from it. So I'm definitely looking forward to listening to that whole interview.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it too, they were mentioning that it was back in the early days of dots too. So a lot of the dot stuff wasn't really functional.
Where you
They
kind of had to do
decide
most
what
of the
to
stuff
do.
yourself anyways.
Yeah. So, okay, well, yeah, if anybody's interested in it, it's up on Steam. I put a link in the description. You can go check it out. I would definitely recommend it. I'm going to be playing it some more this weekend when I get some time, and over the next, I think it's open for 10 days in this alpha release. They're testing it, making sure people like it and seeing what people like and don't like and getting feedback and stuff. So I think it'll be fun. Well, I know it's fun. I had fun with it. I want to dive on to the big topic now, which is the end of code. And I just love the look on your eyes face every time I talk about it.
I have a lot to say to think about this too.
Yeah. So if you're programming now, you may as well just give up.
I actually have a really good anecdote on this, which I think sums this up perfectly for me, which has literally just happened to me yesterday. So this is very prescient. I do contract work, currently on a team with a bunch of people doing a couple of projects. And one of the people I work with is a guy I've worked with for about 10 years. And we've done on and off projects together. He's an artist, I'm a programmer. And for the most part, I've written code that we've worked with, and he's sort of seen me code, and we've debugged stuff and worked things out together. But fundamentally, I write code, and he can kind of string some if statements together. But let's just say, once you get into the switch statements, that's where he's at. So that's kind of the level he's at with programming. But ever since ChatGPT, he's been writing his own scripts. Quite a lot of them, in fact. And that's fine. It interests me because it's very curious to see. And also, you can spot a script that's come out of ChatGPT based on the fact that often the comments are still left in and the coding style varies wildly from line to line as time goes by. So there's a lot of really interesting triggers, but you can spot. Either way, it's interesting because a lot of the proof of concept I realized for me was that he'd create a lot of scripts that previously he would have a terrible time explaining to me. So he'd be like, I want a thing which does this and has this stuff and whatever else and back and forth. And so now he can do a prototype after, spending 2 hours poking at it and getting something. And then he can show me that and I can write the quote unquote real version after the fact. Two thoughts I have, basically. That's the premise, but here's the two interesting parts from my perspective. One of them, I feel like there's a lot more empathy for my job because what I don't think a lot of people realize is if you're on the art side and you're talking to a programmer, it's often very much a case of like, I tell programmer what I want, they do magic, thing comes back and does what I want. But what they don't realize is often there's a lot more complexity behind that request because when somebody gives you a request, they often don't understand what they're actually asking. Make the thing do a thing. And it's like, okay, but what, like, the example I always go with is something like text validation. A very simple example is he was asking me to do a system which did it like a teleporting thing or whatever else. You pick something up and you place down over here. And I said, what happens when you let go? And he goes, oh, nothing. And I said, okay, you can say nothing, but you've now got a thing in space that has been picked up, moved, placed in a hand. You can't say nothing because I have to write, does it go back to where it was? Does it teleport? Does it delete? There's no such thing as nothing. I have to make it do something. And your hand wave of nothing is actually very telling because it means you haven't thought about what the next cases are, but I have to write every single if branch statement and whatever. My point is, as he started writing this, I noticed he'd say, I asked it to do this, but it got it wrong. I had to do this and keep going back and forth. And it gets to the point that ChatGPT is like hiring a programmer to work with you. But the difference is a programmer is going to tell you, you didn't clarify. You need to make that more clear. ChatGPT will go, okay, this does technically exactly what you said. It's like, no, but that's not what I meant. And it's like, there you go. That is step one. That is a good portion of what a programmer's job is. Not giving you the code you ask for, but understanding your problem well enough to write the code you actually need. So that is missing. That's my first point. The second one, I think, is where it really kicks in. he picked a topic that was a bit too big for his boots, let's say, and he tried to do ... AI. And so once you start trying to do AI, it's like welcome to the can of worms, right? So he was kind of trying to build a system with the nodes and do pathfinding and stuff. And the point that I got to, I guess, is that it doesn't really know what he wants because he doesn't know how to describe it, because he doesn't know the differences between behavior trees and quad trees and how to ask for pathfinding in different formats and, you know, what a state machine is versus whatever. So even though he's asking for what he wants, and to go to point two, like, he's not an idiot. Like, he actually brought in, you know, there's that prompt generating prompt. Like, he literally went through the process of using a prompt generator to help generate a better prompt to describe what he wanted. So he's doing all the things you're supposed to do intelligently to use a tool like this to get the work done you need. And it smiles and keeps saying, yes, oh, that sounds great, and does all this stuff. And the end script he gets out at the end of it doesn't do what he wants because it doesn't understand what he's trying to do. So, to the point, I don't see this stuff being a particularly big threat at the moment for those reasons. And I don't think it's about code. And I never even thought it really was, because the ability to type into a keyboard was always the least important part of a programmer's job. It's two opposing sides. It's understanding the metal enough to make it more efficient, because the code you're going to get out of ChatGPT is going to be the most milquetoast generic copy and paste what most people write, but it won't understand the hardware and platforms and whatever it is you're actually trying to do. And on the other end of the spectrum, it won't understand the requirements of the actual client asking for the specific thing they're looking for. So you'll get the 80% in the middle, but the 80% in the middle is not where 90% of the time goes. So that's my general take on the whole thing.
Well, just to kind of expand off that, I think, and this is probably something that's coming at some point, you figure, but I think that these AI tools are going to be really powerful when they start like asking us questions. Because right now, like, if I just like blindly ask them, like, one thing that I've been using ChatGPT stuff for is just like random 3D math stuff that I just don't really want to think about, and just have it just do all those calculations for me. But like, if I just ask, say, hey, make a curve in 3D space from point A to point B, sure, it'll spit me back something. But there are multiple ways that I could maybe get to that. And so if it kind of asks me a couple questions, like, okay, do you want your curve to be kind of more like this or like this? Use this implementation or this implementation. Here are some of the advantages of them. How do you want me to do that? Then you can kind of get to the point that you're like actually looking for, without it just kind of like giving you something and you just like have to reply like, no, that's wrong, and all this. And I think that'd be just like really powerful for everything. If you want to make like a legal document, like, say, like, you can just say like, hey, write me an NDA, and they say, okay, like, what's your business, what kinds of things do you want to protect? It can kind of ask you some questions to get to that like end goal of like what you're trying to do quicker, without having a bunch of just like wasted code.
See, now that's exactly what I use it for. So, for example, I asked it yesterday to write me a function to generate the material design Bezier curve. Well, it's quadratic Bezier curve. That's specifically the kind of the fancy swish animation that Google use for their Android stuff. It's a kind of a modified version of the normal ease in out curve with a tight. It doesn't matter. The point is, that curve, like, you could do it a million ways. You could use an actual curve in the Unity editor. You could do it using, create your own, 4-point quadratic function, bunch of different things. And what it's really fun for is exactly what you described, which is saying, do this 4 times. Give me 4 static functions, slightly differently. And I don't want it to give me the answer. I want it to give me ideas. And sometimes it'll be like, oh, I didn't think of inlining that particular function, or that actually generates less garbage than the approach that I thought of initially. And so there's lots of really fun ways to use it to bounce ideas off that feels very interesting. Because the problem I have is that if you're asking it to describe something like that, you're hitting like 4 or 5 areas. You're hitting the math of the problem, the coding language you're talking about, and in my case, the user experience design principles of material design. So for me to ask another programmer that, they have to know all 3 of those things. And that's universally not really a problem with ChatGPT. It knows the things you're talking about. So getting it to like bounce ideas back and forth and give you variations has been immensely useful. But again, you have to work with it, it doesn't work for you. It has to be like something you have to work back and forth with.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like a lot of times, like, it doesn't necessarily give me the correct answer, but it gives me some like little nugget of something where I'm like, oh yeah, like I remember that, and I can kind of like go off and explore that a little bit more, kind of thing.
So last month I probably would have agreed with you both. When I was using Chat GPT 3.5, I probably would have said the same. And then I saw when 4 came out, and now I'm expecting 5 and 6. And right
See,
now with
you say that, but like, I'll give you an example. I used 4 yesterday. I was doing some Fmod stuff, and I was just like, oh, actually, quick favor there, Mr. GPT. Can you tell me what the function is to get? I forget exactly what I asked it for. I was trying to get a particular piece of data out of Fmod. I think it was like, yeah, I was trying to get the array of label descriptor names from the function called there. And I'm like, which API call is this? I know you can get the array of parameter definition data, but how do I get the specific value array of blah, whatever it is? And I asked the thing, it said, oh, here's the function. And I tried to call the function. It's like, oh, that doesn't exist. And I said,
Right.
that method you said doesn't exist.
That, though.
And then it comes back to me and says, sorry, you're right, that doesn't exist. Here's another one. That second one didn't exist either. And it's like, okay, now I have to go back to the Google documentation to go to the website to find a thing to realize, oh, it's been gaslighting me for the last like 5 minutes of conversation.
I 100% agree. You got to give it the latest docs. And I mean, I think that there are definitely there are specific things when you're working with Infor, at least, that it's going to get wrong. And I would say it's probably pretty consistently going to get things wrong if you do anything that's somewhat advanced. But what it's doing right now versus what it was doing in 3, what it's doing in 4 is night and day different, and it's able to generate code that makes logical sense and solves a lot of the problems that a junior developer would do, like as their day-to-day job. It does a lot of that stuff at or about the same level as a fresh out of school developer who hasn't really got much experience. And it's growing and getting better drastically faster. So I don't expect 4 to completely replace people, but 5, 6, 7, and 8, and that may be by the end of the year, could drastically do that. And it's not like it's going to just instantly replace people. It's going to slow down the rate that people need to hire new developers. If I need to implement some new APIs and I need to integrate my SaaS with 20 different APIs, I don't need to go hire 2 junior devs to go do that full time. I can have Chat GPT and 1 senior dev spend a week on it and have it generate most of the API code and all that shit and generate the unit tests for it to automate that and do all of that stuff for me. I've been using it personally to mostly experimenting, but generating all kinds of stuff. Last night, I had it design an RPG using some characters that I already had. Then I had it design 20 mini games. Then I had it pick one of the mini games and flesh that entire thing out, and then write the code to build this little scanning game where you run around in a Unity world and scan for different material types and stuff, and it highlights them. And the one thing it fucks up is like getting the emission right. It used the wrong property name multiple times, and there were a couple little minor things throughout it that I needed to change, but I told it what was wrong, and eventually it figured it out. But I figure that by the time 5 hits, I'll have to do that much less, and by the time 6 is out there, I probably will have to explain even less and get better and better results. I think that anybody I'm not saying that like all programmers are going to be gone, but I think that if you want to be competitive, you should be looking at and actively ready to use this shit to speed up your development and to answer questions when you get stuck. If your code's not working, paste in the code and have it give you an explanation that, assuming it's correct, can really like tell you why you're doing the thing wrong, what the right way to do it is, and kind of the deeps, the kind of internals of the problems. And
I think you're half right. The problem is
last point. It was just on the optimization stuff. Right now, it doesn't give you super optimized code. You can ask it to, though. And as things get better, it's going to start giving you better and better, more optimized code, just like the compiler does. We don't write assembly and we let the compiler do all that shit because it optimizes the hell out of it. And the AI will be able to, I think, optimize our code better than we will in a relatively short amount of time.
I think you're right, but I think the perspective is wrong because my point is, here's my hot take. I think it will do a lot of the stuff you're describing, but I think you're overestimating the average person's desire to do any of what you're describing, because I think what it's going to do is fundamentally shift software development into the gig economy. I think it's going to be not people using ChatGPT. It will be the idea that you can go to Fiverr and get someone to make you a company is going to be what's going to happen. It's not going to be people using it to solve their problems, because the downside with something like ChatGPT is as soon as it breaks, it really breaks. And I don't mean like the code. I mean like, as you said, if it's like, oh, it got this wrong, it's using the word renderer here instead of material. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't even know what to ask to get it to fix the problem that it's now halfway through a half broken bit and you're suddenly done. Like whatever you're trying to do. And I've seen this, I've seen people do this where they actually, they're literally asking for rewritings of the same function for over an hour and a half, because there's like a spelling mistake and they don't understand the code enough to solve the spelling mistake. And so eventually it'll get it right, but like that's such a wasted amount of time and resources. So what's more likely to happen, I do think you're right, but I think again, it's not going to be people using this. It's going to be that back in the days of web, when it started out with websites, people writing them from scratch, to people using WordPress templates, to then people selling the service of WordPress templates. And I used to meet people who were quote unquote web developers whose job was to go to a company, offer them a website, and then they go and click the menu items and pick a template. Like they weren't really, now they'd write some custom code, but fundamentally the skills they had to have to do that job was infinitely less when they couldn't even write JavaScript, right? And so I see that's the use case. It's not going to be people, it's going to be the company, the new springboarding of like, you know, Airbnb, but developer B&B.
Don't you think that most of those will just turn into SaaSes though? And it'll just be, you know, Square now lets you generate a web page by talking to it and saying, hey, I need a checkout cart. Please add my, jelly beans to the store. And it just does it automatically. And then you don't have to hire somebody.
Maybe
Like,
eventually,
make this
but
candy themed, and it candy themes your thing.
Yeah, but the problem you're going to get is that at the end of the day, people still want people. Like people are going to want somebody to talk to, the back and forth with some level of understanding of what they're going for. So I do believe these. I think these tools will do 90% of the work, but I guarantee you, when it comes to this back and forth, you're going to want to go to somebody and say, "I need this thing done," and because the part, like I said, the technology is not good at understanding intent, not because the computer's at fault. This is like programming. This is the thing that when I first learned programming killed me. It was a thing that number one, I can't understand about programming, is when I started, I thought programming is logical, it's correct, and if I ask the right questions, I get the right answers. And whenever I try to teach it to people, I always give the example of write the instructions to a computer to make a cup of tea. And they say, okay, you take the cup, you bring it over to the kettle, and you pour water in it. I'm like, okay, but you never told me to let go of the cup, right? Like there's little basic things that a computer needs every single piece of information about what it's doing. And so the problem isn't the computer, and the problem isn't the request. The problem is people don't understand how to ask the right questions. And that's going to be a problem forever, because people often want things and don't know what they're asking for. So...
You're right. You got something?
I've been struggling here. I haven't said a word since our conversation started. So
right, the AI is sitting there stunning you, not letting you talk. Like, don't talk, just staring at you, and then the robot off screen.
Yeah. So going back to the first topic here, there is something that hasn't been brought up, which is the Genie wish test, which is you don't know the basics of what you're asking. Therefore, it is my job to fill in the information, and I'm going to use whatever context I want. And if I add in details, you have no idea how to refute these details from happening. And it could entirely change the context of what you asked for. So this is exactly the problem with ChatGPT as it is in the world that we live in right now. It is a word prediction service in a sense. Like literally in the name, GPT is generative pre-trained transformer. It literally studied a set to predict the next word. It doesn't even understand what you're asking. It doesn't even understand that you're asking a question. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's not doing things as a result of you asking it to do it. It's doing things because that's what comes after this set of words. And this is like the devil in the details, because a lot of people think it has intelligence. It does not. A lot of people think it has a lot of understanding. It does not. It's literally just, it has context, and the context is literally the only thing driving it. The last set of words, what's the next set of words to come after? Now,
how is that different from a conscious person, though?
Yeah, so it isn't different from a conscious person, except for the quantity and like variation in how physics works. But it is more reliable because it's not a person. Like you can have it be deterministic, thankfully, in a sense. Now, the reason I brought up the Genie wish test is a lot of people will gain empathy for how you're doing things once they start understanding the things, and they only start understanding the things once they have to start interacting with the things. If a kid doesn't know how clothes become clean, they don't have to think about it. They can live happily. Now you can ask them to clean their own clothes, do laundry, and suddenly, how do you do laundry? How do I wash this with
Throw
warm
'em
water,
on the
cold water?
table.
Do you use? Yeah, there's a lot of steps that can go into just doing basic laundry, but kids don't have to know that until you like teach them or tell them, yeah, this cloth needs cleaning. Here is how you clean this cloth. And in the Genie Wish context, this is something that comes up in a lot of like Dungeons and Dragons games or role playing in general, where you get the opportunity to have a wish, but somebody wants to screw up how you made that wish. So like you can wish for eternal happiness. So now instead of like the world becoming happy and shiny and the reality manifesting to create a situation that you're happy, your character is just stuck with like a curse that makes them just happy the entire time. The wish was granted. The context in which it was granted is not the one that you desired. And I wanted to bring that up because like you have to learn the basics in order to make proper requests, lawyering your wish to the genie in order for it to come out exactly right. And this is exactly what people are learning when they're studying prompt engineering or whatever fancy term you want to call talking to a word prediction service. So there is a lot of skill in that, and this is like it's going to become a profession. And as programmers, right now, when we're using like things that let us generate code, which existed even before ChatGPT, just in a sense that they were more rigid, and even in a sense that the human languages that we have, C#, etc., they all write code for like the compiler, lower level stuff. All of that stuff is literally just relying on us understanding how to communicate with a robot that just looks at words and tries to predict how we want the end result to look like. So that's one part I wanted to talk about. Just there was a lot there. Next, about people saying coding is ended, it's going to replace you, etc. It's not. Even if we like, no matter how you try to extrapolate it, the only thing that happens as a result of something finishing a task for you is you having more time to do another task. And if I am now hiring a programmer to do a job and it takes them 2 days, and I bring in ChatGPT and it suddenly takes them 50 minutes, now I have another day and a half, like 7 hours worth of programmer to use to do more things. So what Jason
but
said
if you
about,
had 2 of them, now you have 1 extra programmer that your boss is ready to let go.
it depends on if there is an end to the tasks. The one thing that is becoming more and more apparent as people get faster is that they have to come up with what to do next more frequently. And that can be like a lot of fear for some people because it's lack of stability in a sense, which is why what Jason said regarding it becoming a gig economy is somewhat true in my own opinion, because as you get to do things faster, you finish what you're doing right now faster, you have more time to do more things.
Plus, so, to back on your point to what Jason said earlier, people are using it to generate ideas, which means rather than having one idea, you can use ChatGPT to generate 6 ideas. And so you want more programmers, even if their job is purely to type more commands in, to iterate that process, to make more prototypes, because not only does it speed up your ability to have things, but to have ideas to iterate them. So yeah, these things scale exponentially, not just in the code, but in the desire and needs to create things.
But it's not all companies have that scale need, right? Like, there's a lot of companies that, if they're working with 3 programmers now, they can probably go down to 2 once ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot make them more and more efficient, or at least they don't need to scale up to 4 as fast. I mean, I don't think that the number of programming jobs is going to disappear. I just think that the growth of programming jobs is going to flatline. I think that right now we're so used to it doubling, what is it, like every year or every 5 years, some crazy number, like the number of programming jobs doubled every couple of years. And I think that is going to come to a flat line. I think that
to be fair, I 100% agree with you. And also, I think it's a good thing. That's the other dirty secret.
You're going to have to be more productive as a programmer, and you're going to have to use this stuff to get things done. If you sit around and you spend your entire day looking at how to use the Microsoft Cognitive Search API and writing all that code instead of just having it auto generate, then you're probably gonna be quite a bit slower. I mean, not that you should never look at it, but it's just like one little example of I built. So we were talking about Cortana earlier. I have to record the video, but I got this full hologram set up. Go ahead.
I just want to bring up something before we dive into that topic. So, in regards to what I wanted to say initially, the AI is not going to replace you. It's going to replace people who don't use the AI. That's specifically because an AI is a personal assistant that makes you adequate or proficient in literally all the topics that it was trained on. And it was trained on a lot. This is why it's working right now. I just want to stress that point. The people think that AI is dumb. It's not dumb. It's just a really good topic upbringer. And it has like a lot of topics it can talk about. So if you ask somebody, like right now, if I'm hiring a programmer and I need them to do something, and that programmer doesn't know how to do that, he can go and research, and that's going to take an amount of hours, maybe days, to figure out the exact thing that they need to do and how to do it properly. But they have a personal assistant right now, ChatGPT, that can bring them all the things that they need instantly, and then they can just focus on the task that I gave them, knowing the context of what I actually want. So
see, that drives me insane because that's what I think it should be. Like, I 100% agree with you, and it drives me insane. People miss this point: is that it's not a genie. The genie metaphor. It's not meant to be giving you the answer to your questions, but it is. You now have a gopher that you can send off and say, "Go read 5 million books on this topic and give me the summary," and then I can ask you hyper-specific questions about the domain we're in, the company we're in, what the client reports like, what the market's trending to, and I don't have to go and do the research. So it is going to save a lot of time. But the idea of replacing the developers is so silly when what it really is going to replace is the amount of just time spent on aggregating data. That's majority of what this is going to do.
Yeah. And also, doesn't this kind of go back to like when, personal computers started coming out, like everyone was like, oh, everyone's going to be able to like finish a whole week's worth of work in 15 minutes. But somehow we're still working, full-time jobs, the whole time. Like it doesn't necessarily eliminate that work. It just, shifts it to other things.
I mean, and I'm more cynical on this because, like, I grew up. My first job was working in something called business process management, which was software designed to avoid having to hire programmers. So I was hired on a team whose job it was to use these drag and drop tools to write software to internally solve problems, so you don't have to hire a programmer to make software. But you know who they hired to use that software? Programmers, because they constantly asked for stuff that was out of scope for what they were actually trying to do, and nobody other than programmers could hack the code to do the thing they actually wanted it to do. So I've seen this come and go, and I've seen the amount of times this happens where people are like, if we could automate this away and make it a drag and drop thing and use graphs and plugins and various stuff, we don't need to hire X, Y, and Z. But as soon as anything goes wrong, if you don't have somebody who knows how it works, you're done. So even if the people still using those tools will still be the people who have to know how they work under the hood. It's always going to be that way.
Yeah, I feel like this is a different situation.
So
I don't know. I remember years ago, probably like 10. Yeah, it must have been a little about 10 years ago at one of the local meetups. There was a developer who was heavily focused on architecture, talking about how he's teaching these microservices and this architecture stuff. But within about 15 years, it's probably going to all be auto-generated, and this job is going to totally change, and you're not going to be writing nearly as much code, and then eventually it's all going to disappear. I thought he was crazy at the time. I was like, yeah, that's definitely not happening. I don't think he's crazy now. I think that right now what we're seeing is this, what like these situations like Brad called out, where you'll generate stuff, make some changes, you'll have to go back in and regenerate it and keep modifying it and keep redoing things and reintegrating stuff in and understanding the context. I don't see that as the long-term way that this works. So I think that maybe it's not in a year, but within 5 years, writing just general code regularly will be a lot less common. I think that it's going to be a lot of it is going to be more just generating the code, maybe talking to it. So maybe sometimes you look at the code, but I think that a lot of people will get into development without code as much, at least starting in the next 5 years. But it's, I don't know. I'm always wrong on all my predictions, but I didn't think this AI shit was going to be crazy either. And now, my opinion on it has changed in the last month. drastic.
This is why I don't love talking about predictions and instead just focusing on what's in here in the present. Now, in regards to Brad's comment, the maintenance of generated programs has two big things I want to talk about. First, the genie test thing from earlier. When you make a genie wish, and the genie wish can come back to you not in the way you expected, it does get the right result. You can make a method. The method can always return the exact thing that you asked for. But the way it does it is significantly important, because if you have a program and that program decides to do something that wastes resources, that's one way that's unideal. But a genie wish can go so wrong that like you would regret having made it. So a program can start killing your hard drive in order to give you the exact result that you want in the end.
Yeah, where's the paperclip maximizer problem at this stage?
Yeah. So for people not aware of the paperclip maximizer, imagine you have an AI and you ask it to make paperclips. It's going to need resources to make paperclips. Paperclips are made with iron. It finds some iron, it mines some iron. Eventually, all the iron runs out. Humans exist. Humans have iron in them. Why not make some paperclips from human iron? So yeah, how the wish is executed is of significance, and having to moderate it is important. Now, people say that humans have to exist in order to moderate the AI. I find that to be slightly wrong, because we already have the ability to ask the AI, hey, what does this implementation do? And then it literally gives you the steps of what's happening, and you can like review, hey, I don't like that implementation, give me a different one. And you can repeat that process before integrating a solution until you have like one that it doesn't tell you is destroying the planet or whatever it can put in the code. So that's one part of the maintenance of code. Now, the other part is if your code changes and you want to regenerate everything and retest everything, this is what test projects are for. This is what like test-oriented design is for. You can literally make tests that make sure that nothing broke as a result of changes of implementations of things that already exist in your code base.
And you can have ChatGPT generate those tests for you first.
Yeah. You can now have ChatGPT make tests for any piece of code that you have, making sure that it returns the things as expected of it. Of course, it's just predicting words, and it's just predicting what implementation it needs to implement. So the tests may be wrong. This is why we need moderation right now still. Yeah.
I don't know. I still think even if I grant you everything, and you can literally write a one-line sentence and it'll write you the perfect piece of software that does exactly what you ask for, no iterations, no nothing. Even if that's the case, it still doesn't matter. And I still don't think it's a problem. And the main reason why is most software development is problem solving. It's you're doing something to do a thing, to solve a thing, to make something, and there's a chain of process of some optimization, some system or some whatever. And the way that the parts that matter is almost never the code writing. The code writing is what you have to do to get it to work. For a very simple example, talk about the car problem. Now, computer vision used to be the gating factor for smart cars forever. We literally couldn't process and see everything fast enough to make the right information. We're past that point now where realistically we can have realistic, real-time, full tracking of all the information in front of us with as many sensors as we need to. But we still don't have these problems solved, because the part that still needs to be figured out is if your car is about to crash into a family, of 3 kids and just standing there on the side of the road, and it has the option to drive into the family or drive off the cliff, what does it do? No AI is going to give you the correct algorithm statement of saying, oh, if in this scenario, drive car off cliff because technically less lives are lost, therefore that's the algorithmically best answer.
That's not what's stopping the self-driving cars right now, though. It's the fact that their vision just isn't up to par, and it's still randomly.
Yeah, but again, AI will keep. We know that's going to get faster. Yeah, sure. Yeah. But again, my point is that's not going to be where the issues lie. In all of this stuff, all software, it always boils down to there's that meta-ethical question. I'm not even talking about ethics as in like morality side. I mean business rules and decision making. The AI, that's why I said they need people, because if someone says, I want a system that does X, this gets back to the rule utilitarian problem of if AI writes code, it's going to write it based on whatever rules it wants to solve problems, based on, as Yura was saying, what it thinks you want based on that genie wish problem. And if it solves it algorithmically, you can end up with a situation where a car is going to always optimize for the maximum lives saved, which will mean your car may decide to drive off a cliff if it wants to, if it saves more lives than yours, and it won't value you, the driver. Now, is that technically a bad thing or a good thing? That's a whole different moral question. But what it does mean is, you as a consumer, do you want to drive in a car which an AI has decided the moral decisions as to what it's going to do in situations which may or may not impact your life, as opposed to human-driven design? So again, code will be written by computers, but you're always going to need this chain of commands, which boils down to someone somewhere is a business owner who wants a product made, and they're the idea person and they can't code. And there's the coder who can code, but then there's that other part to it. You're still going to need that translation layer where they'll say, I want a thing that does X. The programmer is going to turn that into, okay, well, that would need this system, and you cache it this way and do whatever. And they have to reformat all of those questions into, write me a binary search tree that does whatever. And yes, you can shortcut more and more of this as time goes by. But that translation layer from technical jargon, from user requirements, will always need to exist. And your ability to solve those questions will require you to understand some of the metal. Because when it gets all the way back around as a cycle, even if it perfectly does it, you still have to specify, and you're running on an ARM processor, and we've got limited process, and you have to know what you're asking to get the details out. So there'll always be that process.
Yeah, that's the exact thing I was referring to when I said lawyering the wish. This is literally align with my values and ethics. If your code writes things that you don't want to happen, you don't necessarily want that code, which is why right now we're asking for multiple versions as an example. But ideally, we would say it align with my values and ethics. Like whatever is running in my head, do it the way I intended, not the way I told you to, which is it's a big thing. There is one more thing I wanted to bring up as more and more people are talking about, will ChatGPT replace jobs? I said earlier that ChatGPT is only going to replace programmers who don't use ChatGPT because it makes people faster, therefore they're more desirable workers, therefore
kind of like IDEs replacing programmers that don't use IDEs.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that you can write
back
on
in the
Notepad
90s.
or doing it's unlikely that you will be hired if you're not working efficiently for whoever is hiring you, because you needing more time to do the task means they get the result less fast. That means that there is going to be a bigger iteration time. It's less satisfying for whoever is hiring you. It's just a premise that this is only talking about non-luxury work, because there is a research paper showing that humans favor human-made work, which means human programming may be a luxury product in the coming future, among other things of that sort. If you make art, people favor human art. There is a lot to be said about.
I know in sci-fi it's a joke, but it's true. Like in the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? You live in a world where animals are scarce, and so everyone is robot pet animals and pretends they're real to look higher class. And the people who can afford a real chicken are the rich people, because animals are so rare. And so people are faking it by having fake pet shops drop off their fake pets that are robots. And so that idea of well, actually, this art wasn't done by AI. I had a real person make this painting. That luxury tax will in fact be a thing. I guarantee it.
Do you think that that's going to be maybe a selling point of games in the future? This game was made
by a human,
made by people. Yeah.
And I think
I've heard that, but to be honest, I think 99% of the people just don't really care as long as it's a fun product in the end. There definitely will be, the people who want, the authentic handcrafted thing for sure. But I think for the most part, most people may just not care.
Yeah. So the first thing to point out in what you said is most people don't care about a lot of things that happen. If you have a bottle cap, you don't care how it was made, where it was made, the situation surrounding it. It's when it's brought to your attention when you decide to care whether you take that information favorably or not.
You watch the how it's made video on bottle caps, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, or so whatever cool. else it would be. If you don't get the information brought up to your mind, it's not going to be something of impact because you're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
So if somebody has a piece of information that's not going to put them in favor, they can either reveal it to you out of honesty and hope that you'll process it in a way that eventually leads into you favoring the information because it was honest, or it's just straight up good information that you think, oh, that's going to give value. But it's still something that's worth discussing separately. The thing about humans being replaced with work, right now we're seeing a gigantic spike in automation in AI. Like there's been the Microsoft Jarvis project, and there's like AutoGPT, and people started building networks of AIs that they give tasks, and the AI starts splitting the tasks to other AIs. The AIs execute the tasks, report the result, and the reason we're doing this right now, I want to make it very, very clear, is that these AIs don't know what they're doing, first off, and they have limited context. It means after a certain amount of words, they forget what is going on. So letting one of them do all the work is too much, and that AI is just going to start forgetting things. So we've split the work to multiple AIs, and each AI can remember a certain set of tasks. It's a small amount of memory that this particular AI has to consume, but it can delegate tasks to others so nothing breaks. And this is what people can fear replaces jobs, because each one of these is like a junior programmer, assistant, whatever have you, but they're all proficient at all jobs. They're like, each one of them is of equal skill.
And we're already there. Like ChatGPT can ask like DaVinci to tell it code and come back with it because if it relies on certain things. So there are already models talking to other models to get sub responses for stuff.
Yeah, but that still doesn't replace programmers. That's the thing I wanted to get into. You get the task completed almost instantly because almost everybody is competent and almost everybody is doing the job for you. So right now, programmers are being replaced only as much as they are not the person being paid to do the job. Right now, if I can decide to, well, not me, but if someone decides that they want the task done, they're going to either hire a programmer or hire a service that deploys the request and does all the necessary mumbo jumbo in order to give me the result back 20 times faster without me needing to communicate anything more than the initial message. A lot of people are going to choose that. But there is still like the value of programmers in understanding your intent long term. Because these AI, again, limited context, they forget. Humans luckily have way more neurons, so we can remember things for a longer duration of time. We can have like... There is a lot that AI still doesn't have in humanity that
Yet.
is not going to be replaced. No, it's like... well, okay, yet.
It's growing, right? My concern is eventually it's going to get bigger than us and smarter.
I really don't want to fearmonger here. This stuff, even if you aren't hired by the particular person who's going to do all that job, the value of your intelligence is still there, and it can still be hired by literally anything else. Or if people aren't going to give you the job, make the job. The AI is there for you too.
Yeah, honestly, like I'm not saying don't be afraid of AI. I'm saying you're being afraid of the wrong thing. Like it will ruin your life, but not for your job, because there's much more cynical and dangerous ways this stuff is going to change the world. If you want a really simple example, there's a great book called Predictably Irrational, which talks about how human beings make decisions, and the fact that if you write 0% cat urine on a product, I don't have to imply that I've implied my neighboring product has possibly greater than 0% cat urine in their product, right? And so this is the way people think, and there's a reason why 0% works better than 1% on certain things. Like there's lots of like all of this stuff that the worry shouldn't be that AI is going to be bad for this, that, or the other for jobs. It's we can algorithmically take large data sets on how people do things. We can have AI make decisions based on it, and then we can have it construct like if you think clickbait is bad now, like let's all be real here. YouTube has gotten to the point where there is a meta game to thumbnails, to text, to content, whatever. Now, and then you end up with articles, which are all of these horrible clickbaity things. But the problem is they're terrible because everyone knows they're just aggregated nonsense. But now it's not aggregated nonsense. Now it's actual content that's able to be scraped, processed, and redelivered and repackaged and whatever else. And so if you're going to be afraid of AI, be afraid of how it's going to ruin every aspect of your engagement with information, social interaction, and how you're going to deal with your decision making and how you're going to be pretty much programmed to do the things that the world wants you to do, because a company can say, we want to increase sales of this by 20%, and so change all of our marketing material to subtly put two things together to make people do this. For the example in that book, Predictably Irrational, one of them was a bread maker wasn't being sold because people were like, why the hell would I buy a bread maker? I don't like, what am I going to do with that? So they brought out a second bread maker. You'd think that would be a bad idea, but if you bring out a second one that is bigger and, well, that second one that's smaller but more expensive, and someone goes to the shop and sees two bread makers, and one of them is bigger and cheaper, they're going, well, I wasn't going to get one, but if I was going to get one, I'm going to get the bigger, cheaper one. And so the sales increased. And once you started setting a price, like people are stupid and irrational and they make dumb decisions. And so the idea that AI is not the problem because of AI. AI is made by scraping the world's information, which is made by people who are fallible. And so AI will be fallible by proxy. And it'll be fallible in dangerous ways, because not because it's actually trying to be dangerous, but because it's going to parrot whatever training data set it's gotten from its starting point. So yeah, if we're going to be afraid of AI, at least be afraid of the right things.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, I think that they're definitely outside of just the coding side, and I think that when we talk about the game side too, it's actually quite a bit different. I think there are lots of other just general possible giant pitfalls that are going to appear in the next few months or years with AI. Not just like, like I said, for our jobs, but I think a lot of other jobs are going to get hit really bad, and it's going to have some weird impacts on economies around the world. I've seen people who already like were going to hire people and stopped because they were able to get most of the stuff that they needed done with AI, hired one person instead of 5, and not in programming, but other writing stuff for business and things.
Yeah. So there is something I want to bring up from the comments, if I can, that's kind of related to this. There is a lot of talk about how will ChatGPT affect existing products and like selling new ones. So somebody asked, for example, that exam.
How will ChatGPT affect Terraria?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to say is right now, to the best of my ability to understand whatever is going on in the company that I haven't been communicated to yet, it's not going to, because like what many other companies are saying, it's a security risk, because most companies rely on having, intellectual property and secrets that they use in order to get their edge in the market. And ChatGPT, being connected to the internet, gains context, sends it over, and there has already been multiple reports of AI being bringing results of like one person to another that reveals classified information. So if it's connected to the internet and this is something sensitive, it's not going to go there just out of security. Now, I'm not saying I was told to do that. This is like literally my own understanding of the internet as we speak right now, from what I've been seeing. I had no plan, and I'm not planning to use ChatGPT to ask classified information. That said, it can affect me understanding things because it's a personal assistant. And if I need to understand the topic, like say writing a Blender Python script for my own purposes, it helps me because this is generating new information based on all the publicly available information. And now I can do more tasks. Now, right now, to the best of my ability to understand, it didn't affect Terraria, the game that I work on, specifically because we don't have any need for it. Like everything we're doing to make players happy, and like specifically, we already know what we want. It's not a lack of ideas, and we already know how to execute them. It's taking time, and we don't use anything like Copilot or the likes, so it's just not affecting to my current information. As for new products, if you have secrets, I don't think that you're like going to use ChatGPT with context of these secrets. But it's going to help a lot in the general tasks. So products can get out faster, can get out more reliably because you can make your program stable. One thing that I have been experimenting with, along with a friend, is seeing how much it can optimize code so it can be high quality, high readability, and high sustainability, which means like it can be modified easily, read easily, so others can understand it, and like it's secured from bugs. It's been really helpful with that. It's like it taught us stuff that we didn't know. I shared some of that in Jason Stories server on the resources channel because like, oh, I didn't know this existed.
I've been doing the same with pointer and bit shifting stuff, where it's like optimize this a bit and getting just ever so slight stuff that it's like I wouldn't have done it that way. That's fascinating. So there's little bits of that.
Yeah. And like the more this stacks up, you can get a higher quality product. You can put it out faster, and you can patch it with content for time to come faster. So I'm excited for how games will end up with this. I just really hope it doesn't end up in like dumpster fires of like games made in like one day and thrown out and like never touched again, because AI can do exactly another one in like a week. um, yeah, that part has been what's really scaring me lately. Like people just dumpster firing new assets nonstop, because right now it can do dialogue, it can do faces, it can do audio for the faces. Like I haven't seen something that completely utilizes it, but it scares
Well,
me.
now we've got the world generation stuff. We've got videos too. Like it's getting covering a lot of those bases. But I guess there's one thing I really want to dive in because it's a thing that Jason's focusing on a lot, and I'm very fascinated on this concept. So first, I'm going to throw a question out to you, Jason. I just want your thoughts on this first. What do you think of when I say the word clip art?
Clip art. I think of, I mean, sadly, like the 1990s and Clippy popping up in my head and random crap that I can download and put into a Word doc that's going to be shitty.
Perfect. I was hoping you'd say that, and that's a men of a certain age thing. Because if you grew up in a certain era, clip art was the crap free disc you got with your Word or whatever, or your PowerPoint to put in random images into your thing. Do you know the origin of clip art? Do you know how it started?
I don't. I'm sure I've heard it before, but I cannot remember it at all.
So it originally started with print media. So the idea was people would write copy. And so writing copy basically means I'm selling a printer. And so I'm going to write a paragraph going, buy our printer. It's amazing. Here's the whatever. It's for the good on the go businessman who wants to whatever. And so that's what people used to do a lot of. But if you wanted to do an illustration to make your things, your advertisements stand out in print media, you would hire an artist. And you'd hire an artist to hand draw a guy near a computer to kind of put an image next to your work. And that got very expensive. So somebody had the smart idea of making an art book of all of these drawings that are like pre-done in a set style of a bunch of posh looking businessmen that you could put in any product marketing thing. And those books would sell for thousands because they'd be sold to a company who's a print company who would buy a book of clip art for 20,000. Then other people saw this business and were like, I can do art for cheaper. And so you'd make cheaper art that you would then digitize. And once you bring in the digital age and people start using Word and all these digital software and go on, it iterates, you end up with a lot of schlocky crap that people have just now become as this meme, where by the time it trickles down to the average consumer, it becomes something that we're all used to as a joke. But then what happens next? Nobody wants clip art anymore. So now what people want is images. And so you've got Getty Images and stock image websites. And so there's lots of that. And how much do they cost? Thousands, because you're buying per image 50 or 60 for a single image, for a single photo for your thing. But then someone says, I can make this cheaper. Let's do it as a service. And so now you've got a giant service selling all of these things. And then someone goes, we don't want images anymore. We want videos. So now you've got YouTube videos where you're buying services to give, and so on and so on. So my point to you with all of that is, if I was to ask you what is clip art, to you it's this really cheap, crappy joke thing. But it started out as the print industry. It started out as being the backbone of the thing that made this stuff work. And what we talk about is the stuff that we think is important about whatever it happens to be, game engines or renderers or whatever other process we're talking about. To say that it will go away, I 100% agree with you. But if you were to say content production for augmenting copy, has that gone away? It certainly has not. It's just switched to After Effects templates and plugins and media generators. It has not gone away. It is just form change to the point where if you're paying attention, you're just going to keep moving with the times. So like what we call a programmer might literally just be prompt engineer in X number of years. But the job, the task, the need to know the stuff of how it works, none of that's going to change.
Well, what you're kind of describing there, Jason, is basically just like the race to the bottom. Like if you have some product that can be commoditized that pretty much anyone can just generate and create, really one of the, primary ways that you can undermine someone's market is just by making the same thing, but for cheaper. So then
I agree, but my point isn't that. My point is the next step. Once you do race to the bottom, what are you left with? Throw it away in whatever the next thing is, right? Because you're right, it is a race to the bottom, but when a race to the bottom happens, something else comes up afterwards. Like right now, I believe we're getting to a race to the bottom of cinematic Marvel schlock, and we're getting to the same thing with open world games. And so what's going to happen is a resurgence of whatever the next thing happens to be, nostalgia for X or Y or whatever. And so yes, it is a race to the bottom, but my point is that this cycle will continue because everything is cyclical. It's going to be whatever the next thing is, and so that's why none of this worries me, because whatever we hold dear now will race to the bottom as everyone is like, well, you don't need to pay for artists anymore. But the next thing will have to be, well, now there's people making fully 3D animated movies using AI. God, I better learn how to do that better, because now you're competing. And so whatever that is, it'll just keep scaling and scaling.
Yeah, but it's scaling without the humans. It's scaling to do more work per human, and more content production per human, and the content consumption per human can't go up. So production is going to go drastically up per person, so you need less people. That's and I don't know what we do about it. And it's not like it's just going to hit this, right? It's going to hit, I think like one of the big obvious ones people talk about is like drivers, like automated driving. Once that takes over, it's like a quarter of the economy, right? And it's going to totally, like, what are you going to do? Like, it's going to hit a lot of stuff very quick, and it's just hitting code and writing and image stuff first, I think. And it's going to change stuff. I want to talk real quick, though, about the game side of it, because we talked a lot about things that were kind of important, like cars crashing and other shit, whether to hit people. But when it comes to like actual like AI in games, like I feel like my end result vision is more like a Holo-deck, right? Where you're telling it what to do, you're telling it what you want, and giving it the updates to the context, and then maybe you're training it while playing through it and explaining it before you show it to somebody else. But you're essentially just doing it all with voice, and you don't have to know about the low-level details of how a fucking holo emitter works or any of that other stuff. You're just telling it, what to do, and it's building the thing. And I wonder how long it will be before game development is just like that, where there's enough power and enough optimization that it can do, where you go, hey, I want a Minecraft style game, I want voxel based, or maybe you don't even say it's voxels, but it's destroyable terrain that's 1 meter by 1 meter, and you kind of give it this thing and you're talking to it, and it's building it as you're talking and comes up with it. I mean, I think we'll see early versions of that do a really shitty version in the next few months at the very least. But I wonder, there's probably already some out there, I don't even know. But I wonder when it's going to be like that for just replacing it all. And will it matter when it's a game? Like does it matter that what the code looks like underneath if it works?
But again, that's perfectly fine. But like, take the world you're describing and follow the logical conclusion. It is now easy to make Minecraft by asking for it. Okay, so Minecraft comes out, then another one, and then another one, and then 10 more, and then people get tired of it. And so, okay, what's the next thing?
It's easy to make any game at that point. You just imagine the game, tell it what you want, and work through the different scenarios with it. It's not that you have to copy Minecraft.
Yeah, but then people will want the next thing. Like, for example,
then you come up with the next
thing together at some point.
I feel like it just makes it so the designer is able to do the job without the engineer, essentially, and without the artist.
There is a name for this, and this is the personalized Eden or heaven or whatever you want to call that. Because if there is a content generator that generates just the content that you personally want on demand without restriction forevermore, you have no need for other products. This is the main problem. You generate all the products henceforth with the exact precision that would make you happiest every single time. There is no next after that, because unless you want suffering, in which case you can ask for that as well. This is your own personalized and then do whatever you want. We are very far from that.
Right, but I mean, people are lazy too. Most people aren't going to do it. Only some tiny subset of people are going to do it, and only some subset are going to put in.
You asked about like a Holo-deck where you just go in and you ask for what you want. And like, if we're being serious, if it can just read your mind, wouldn't even need to ask.
No, if it can read your mind, then it doesn't need it at all.
I truly believe this won't work. I
ahead.
guarantee you none of this is going to work, because this is the rule of cool problem. It's the experience machine problem. There's a ton of philosophy and psychology around why this won't work, because everybody thinks this is what they want, But as soon as they get it, they realize there is a chasm of difference between what sounds good and what's reality. It's Minority Report. If you ask a whole lot of people who've seen the movie Minority Report and said, wouldn't it be really cool if I could interact with my movies and my desktop like that, by flailing my hands in the air and throwing pictures and videos away? But anybody who's ever done that hates it with a burning passion. There's the concept of gorilla arms, where your arms get really sore if you're waggling them over your hips for too long. And all of this, if you tell me you build the absolute perfect ultimate holodeck scenario, without getting into tons of the philosophy of this, one, the experience machine principle is the idea that if I could put you in a world where everything always did exactly what you wanted all the time, there'd be no reason to do it, because you wouldn't enjoy it, because you'd never be surprised, there'd never be intrigue, and even if you ask for surprises, you know you've asked for a surprise, and therefore it takes away whatever was there. So from the experience perspective, you don't want a game that's done with that. The second part is you've got that triangle of motivation. Why do people engage with motivation? They want autonomy, they want a sense of self, there's a whole lot of cycles of how people engage with content. And if you're telling me an AI made it to make me happy, there's going to feel like that outcry people had.
An AI made it to your specifications to do whatever it was you told it to do.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Other people.
Take a game where someone says, I want a game that makes you feel like a badass. And so you do that, and you end up with a game where it's like, oh, don't worry, we just make sure that 80% of your shots hit your targets. And you tell someone that, and they're like, I hate that. That's right. I don't want a game that's always going to lie to me. And that happened, right? Remember, there's the outcry on Twitter where people found out that devs have been lying to them the whole time, that there's like their health powers out, because people don't want the truth. They want an experience. And so, like, again, all of this stuff, we're going to learn very quickly that once you can have the computer do all of the stuff that you think you want it to do, you're not going to want the experiences you think you want, because reality is very, very different from the philosophy of the idea of having the dream of being able to make whatever you want whenever you want it.
I just want to bring up a memory that you just made me chuckle so hard right now. Back when Anthem came out, there was this one gigantic thing players found out, which was the starting weapon, the weakest gun in the game, would deal exactly as much damage or more than the end game guns, the legendaries that you would keep finding. The numbers were all fake. One player would see like 13k and the other would see 250,000, but the gun did 1/4 of the enemy's max health. And it I just remember finding that out, and I was laughing the entire day back then. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, people do want good experiences. I do want to bring up devil in the details caveat, though. AIs are really good at predicting what the next thing that happens will be. There's already sciences that show that cancer could be found like 4 years in advance, before a doctor can like notice the details. There's a talk about saving FPS games by actually understanding like if the movement is cheater based or not, by looking at how the cheater moved like their inputs. And those things are noticing them before you as a human can understand them. So applying the principle of you wanting to be surprised and asking for the surprise, if it can read your mind and it can realize that you're going to want a surprise soon, before you understand that you are going to even want to ask for a surprise, it could set you up for it. And then it could just grant it to you. The idea of a personalized add-on is that there is no I asked for it, therefore it's not appealing. It's going to account for whatever appeals to you, and not it's always going to give you what appeals to you most. It's going to make you always happy, which is like, this is why you want it. And the biggest problem with that is that if everybody has access to their own personalized add-on, nobody's going to want another person's as an idealized add-on like the personalized.
That's why you have to trick them and trap them in it, and you put them in these little
Okay,
pods on
so
the wall, right?
I wanted to get
and you
back
make them
into the
think it's
concrete
the
in this.
1990s.
Yeah,
I've
so
seen,
I
seen the documentary.
I really wanted to get into the concrete of this, like the right now situation. So right now, AI can generate characters for you that would be somewhat to your specifications, but it's only somewhat, so you can still get surprised by it. It's like you can be happy with it and also be surprised and intrigued and engage with it more as a result of not knowing everything that it has, like a loot box. You keep getting things and you sometimes get a legendary experience and sometimes not. But it does seem to be that people enjoy doing this together. The AI dungeon game that like you can bring in some friends and like go and experience and see what other people do. They bring in their own experience, and you're like seeing their own gacha rolls on what AI will give them. That's something that has been incredible for me to like see in real time how people react to this. There's like a real enjoyment. There's a ton of videos on YouTube of how people like watching other people rolling for random results. So we're already in a good state where like it's engagement hell, if I can call it properly. And soon, well, not soon, in the future, we can kind of reach a closer to personalized item, but we probably never achieve that due to physics. Just in the concrete, we have something that works. Question is, when does it become good enough that people don't want to share it with others because it's good enough for them alone? Yeah, silence.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out if we're stuck in the matrix right now.
No.
Yeah, maybe we're already plugged in.
Explains why my neck always hurts.
Okay.
Right.
Going back to a topic that I moved you away from, Cortana, speak.
Oh yeah, so I mean, that was one of the things that kind of set me over the edge, was playing with it and seeing just how quickly it was able to generate. So, for context, earlier this week I asked around for a Cortana visual model so that I could have something that matched the Halo movie, so it would match with the theme of the hologram setup that I wanted to do. And the reason for it was that the night before that, I'd had ChatGPT generate a Cortana voice assistant that used ChatGPT. It uses 3.5 through the API, but it generated the entire thing while I was in bed in about a half hour. So I was in bed, a half hour of me kind of going back and forth with it on prompts and exactly how I wanted it to work. And it gave me all of the code to listen to my voice, to send that up to Microsoft. It told me the steps to set up my Microsoft account. It told me the thing that was wrong when it gave me a stupid error on the Microsoft page because their page was crap. And then it generated the code to integrate into ChatGPT as well, put the entire thing together, and it almost, I would say it was about 90% there, with about 10% of me having to correct it and to say, that's not how you change this thing. Can you do that? Or I think you forgot something here. I told it a couple things, went through maybe like 10 different prompts total, and had the code for it up and working. And then I put it on the Tilt 5 board, but that was, that I just dropped in a prefab. I didn't have to do any code. So, and now I got a working hologram that I can chat to, ask it questions, and have it remember a good amount of context about what I want, and it just freaking
That's
works.
one thing that's nice about the API is, so for people who don't know with the ChatGPT API, it's literally you send an array of everything that's been said back and forth. And so it's up to you how much data you want to send at each call that will continue to increase its context for what's going on. So I actually wrote my own thing in Unity for very much the same thing that lets me save out a history log of a conversation and like resume it from any point. Which leads me to a point, this is a side note. I know we've basically been doing the debate on the morality of it all, but here's a little pro tip to make it even more fun, because I've been using this a lot. If you go to prompthero.com, there's like prompt tools and tips for making better prompts. And one thing I strongly recommend is, if you ask it, there's a particular one called the character prompt. If you give it the character prompt and ask it to roleplay as a character, and then say, but you are a character, blah, blah, you could literally get it to have a personality of whatever it is you're emulating. So if you literally say, you are Cortana from the Halo series, you have all of the knowledge and history and memory of that character, not only will you get your chatbot thing responses, you will also get back the like personality and the quips and the humor of the character. So that makes it infinitely better, because I did that with various different characters from things. Like I had a chat with Fraser Crane on his radio show, like silly things which are just really fun to do. So I highly recommend like not just giving it prompts to make the chatbot, but like preload the chatbot with a character of itself, if that makes sense.
A few things there. One is that the character has to be publicly like included in media so that it could be trained on, so that it could be predicted.
But you can make one up. I've done that too.
Yeah.
I've basically done it. You are a scientist who works on whatever. Yeah.
And that only works so far if in the world of like what the information that you give it, which means if you gave it little, it's not going to have much of its own, which means it's going to be a rather generic character. So the more you write, the less context you can have, because it's busy being the character and like most of the context that it has. Because it wasn't pre-trained on it, it's new training. The second thing I wanted to bring up is that yes, you can give it all the conversation that happened so far, so you can get to like the same state, but there is no seed. What do I mean by seed? Randomized content usually will always give you a randomized result. There is a seed that makes it deterministic in traditional technology that we have right now, but ChatGPT does not have a seed. So even if you had a game and that game had a conversation with ChatGPT and that conversation was entirely saved and you loaded the save because you wanted to try a different result, you can, but you can't get the same result back. Because
yeah, actually, if you want a good example of this too, like the Kajiro plugin, a lot of people have probably tried that, the downloaded Unity integration with ChatGPT. That if you look at the source code for that literally just creates a menu item, runs it, and whatever. I watched a video that explained how to use it, and the video said, "Oh, sometimes it just won't randomly work, so click the button a few times." And that's exactly what you're saying, where they don't realize that what it's actually doing is writing uncompiled code that breaks and then deleting the file and doing it again. And so all you're doing is re-rolling, and because there isn't any context of that seed to get the right answer.
Yeah, but the thing with that is that people think like they can build something deterministic, and right now they're not even allowed to. And this is for better and worse, because you can always get a different result, but you will never get the same result back.
Honestly, to me, that's less of a problem, because what I think is a bigger issue is unless you're literally going to train your own model, which is actually what a lot of people recommend, is you don't just like raw use ChatGPT, because the problem with it, which I think is a much bigger issue, is the tokenized pricing model. That if you do want to retain context, it retains. If I write a sentence and I say write me a short story, and it writes me a short story, to continue talking about that short story, I have to send it back my prompt plus the short story and ask it to continue. And so if it writes me a long story, suddenly I'm paying for the privilege of resending it the thing it sent me to ask it to add another line to the thing it sent me. And so even if you're only adding, like, do the same thing but replace all the A's with U's, I've basically given it a very simple task, but it's going to cost me the 5,000 character paste of I did again to repeat the exact same thing over and over again. So I think the bigger issue, at least, is presently the model of it being this general thing. I think what's going to be is much more valuable is once we hit the point of these personalized assistant model type stuff, the idea of some service providing a, hey, just give up your freedom altogether and just give us all of your emails, all of your text, all of the files in your computer, and we're just going to build you a customized model that you can query against your own data set. That's going to happen. And the idea that you're going to get a camp of people split between don't put your data into a chat model versus people who are going to say all of my data into a chat model. There's going to be a very clear divide between those two categories of people.
Yeah. Jason, what you're saying about, asking ChatGPT to respond as if you were some character. That reminds me, I was talking to somebody at GDC, and they said that they basically told ChatGPT, like, pretend you're a Linux VM and only respond to valid like Linux commands. So then it was like they did ls, and it like printed out like the files of a home directory. They're like, okay, CD into the documents folder, and then like they said, like gave it some additional context. They said like create like a tic-tac-toe game. They did ls, and it had like all the file names, and they could like cat one of the files, and it like printed out all the like contents of that file. So I thought that was
I did the same for a Git repo, and I let me pull back previous branches of nothing that didn't exist that I was making up on the spot. So yeah, that stuff works. But again, I don't know, what interests me the most was the personality bit, because I truly believe that a lot of people are missing the forest for the trees on what this technology is going to do, which is like, this is what I was saying just before we went live. The bit that I was like particularly excited by is if you take the size of the internet, I don't think people really fathom how big the internet is and how much of it is content like YouTube. How much of the internet is just a sea of videos, and how much information is in those videos that is very hard to parse and get information out of. And people generate more content every second than we could possibly consume. And so human beings are making lots of garbage all of the time, digital garbage 24/7. So the problem isn't the information. We're not short information. There's sensors all around the world connected to all sorts of things, collecting everything about the universe at all times. There's companies who have just ongoing, constant aerial sensors and various different things and satellites. Information is not our problem. It has always been interfacing with that information. And people aren't going to read medical papers. They're not going to read reports. They're not going to care about watching 4-hour videos that explain stuff in vivid detail. And so, yes, there's currently issues around, false information and whatever. But the fascinating bit for me is people don't care because it's not personal. But if you can write a chatbot, which is just with a prompt, and again, I've done this, I've basically just given it a pre-chat thing. The thing that's going to make this night and day difference for the average consumer is when it stops talking to you like a teacher. Because right now, every time you talk to a chatbot, it's like, hello, yes, I'm here to help you. And it's this kind of pandering but slightly frustrating, like preppy, person who's trying to help you out in your team. Yeah. And that gets tiring very quickly, right? But if you give it prompts where it feels like a person, once you have people able to have a conversation and they feel like the person is related, they can relate to it, they have a parasocial relationship to it. Once companies start selling you personality typed things, this whole thing will change because people will start to empathize with it in a way where they don't understand. Again, going back to people being irrational. To me, that's the night and day difference. My last example on that before I turn it back to the floor is when I ask it, what is the tallest animal in the world? It says, well, the tallest animal in the world. It goes to this whole big boring paragraph of you just basically puked out Wikipedia to me. I asked it to act like a particular character from a particular TV show that I watched as a kid. And I asked it that exact same question. And it said, I don't know, man, but it's probably taller than the two of us put together. I was like, that is fantastic. Then I said, no, but really, and it's like, okay, fine. It's probably and then it goes in through a few different things. It's like, that's what I want. I want to actually engage with this information in a way which doesn't feel sterile and boring and disinteresting. And I think a lot of people who look at computers and information and all this stuff as this tedious sea of stuff, but are able to actually go, oh, I want to learn about this topic, but I can do it by having a fun, whimsical conversation with somebody who has who will get my joke references. Like, I asked this virtual chatbot what its favorite doctor from Doctor Who was, and it debated me out of why I was wrong with my preference. And it's like, this is in the middle of us talking about algorithms. Like, I was able to go back and forth seamlessly between talking about what the best algorithm for this problem is versus the make a joke about a TARDIS that it gets, and then it calls me back and references it back, and we have a meta conversation about this stuff. So all of this is to say, that is where this is going. I think people are so missing the point. It's not going to be all this stuff. It's going to be the fact that once people engage with computers in a way where it's like a person you're talking to, that's going to change the world because everyone is going to suddenly feel like they're enjoying information. And I really can't stress that enough. When you can engage with information and it's not searches, it's not screens, it's not clickbait, we've fallen out of love of information. The internet has made us feel like Twitter's this horrible cesspool of misinformation. Articles are clickbait. We hate information. But if you can just subtly change everyone in the world's perception that information is now something to have a fun conversation with, your smart friend who knows your jokes, who's giving you the information, but through this way, suddenly teaching is fun again, learning is fun again, conversations are like, the whole world will change communicationally because we're able to tweak information to make it engaging. That, I think, is the big product. But just that's the thing that's going to change the world.
Do you think that's going to be in Alexa?
I don't think it's going to work from one of the big companies because they're going to have to be so brand safe. It's going to be somebody who's going to start out with something that's a little bit cheekier, and it's going to they'll end up falling into brand safe territory eventually. But I think it's going to have to be somebody who's going to actively make something which can be cheeky and, not have to fulfill all the various different corporate requirements of whatever.
So I just wanted to add some asterisks on the things you said as you talked perfectly about the topic of AI maintaining roles. When you said humans generate garbage, I wanted to bring it up really quick. A lot of people take offense when you say that they generate garbage because what, my content is not meaningful? No, it's not about the content. It's about things like all these statements that happen as you talk. It's not the information that anybody cares about. It's you brain farting. So
actually, I'll double down and say both. I also think most people create garbage, as most content is trash. I will just point that out too.
To save you.
No, I truly stand by that. I think that because we live in a world where every thought, every idea, every book, every picture you take, every website you visit, when you live in a world where you've got 500 people recording the same concert they're going to from their phone and uploading the internet. That's not, how useful is that when there's a high quality 4K camera recording a conference or recording some concert, and there's 5 other people recording their videos up on YouTube generating garbage content. Now again, I'm not saying people enjoy creating, but there's a fundamental difference between information that's fun to create versus information that's fun to consume. So when I say garbage, I mean informational dense versus dense information, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a big difference there.
So that was one thing I wanted to bring up. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that the AI maintaining a role right now is critically flawed because it's very sterile about how it maintains its role. A lot of times, if you're going to ask it something that does not fit within the role that you have given it, like say you are a pirate at sea in a fantasy world that does not have technology, and I'm like, hey, give me your cell phone, usually the first thing that would happen with the existing ChatGPT models is, as a insert role, I can X or I cannot Y. As so a role, I cannot do whatever. That is the worst part that happens because the AI breaks the fourth wall to inform you that this is the thing that it can or cannot do because of its role. It's aware that it is role playing, and you can't.
Have you seen the
make
one
it
where people told it
like
not
that.
to say that? And they were like, do not ever say the sentence, I am a whatever. And it's like, okay, cool. So we're not going to say
Manual
that, sure.
override.
But then the next response is, well, as a chat model, I can't tell you I'm not a chat model. It's like, it's like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, so this is like the biggest problem with AI right now. You absolutely cannot break that rule because it's just generating a scenario of like theater for you. There's
And for
like
people who don't know, like the reason that happens is they're using like a chain of command process here. So, and you'll see this, like Bing does this to the point where it's super noticeable. Where you ask it a question, it'll actually spit out what it really wants to say, and then that gets fed into a transformer, which goes, hang on a second, we actually can't say that, and it gives you the sanitized version. So the reason you can't break these rules is because oftentimes there's a final prompt session which takes whatever output you've got, feeds it through something else, and then only gives you the output from that thing. So those guard clauses are pretty hard to get by. Now, there are ways to get around various guard clauses, but there are some, so just it's frustrating.
Yeah, there is also one third thing I wanted to bring up regarding everything you said about people being generators of garbage, in a sense, which is you've been using a tool lately that I haven't picked up yet, but sounds very useful. Read Eyes Wither.
Yes.
Yeah, specifically because it can make information more dense for you to consume. Like you are seeing an entire video, and it's going to be 2 hours of a podcast, and there's going to be a lot of topics in it. But you just want to know the critical information. Right now, there is this video, Filmot. What was the?
I love film
Yeah.
models, but yeah, that one's great. I use that a lot.
Yeah. So right now, for people not aware, there is a site that takes YouTube videos and transcribes them and lets you see all the subtitles either generated or manually input by the video content creators, and you can search text through that. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up is because listening to voice by like pure rules of existence is information over time. Whereas text, you can intake like a gigantic amount into your eye in a split second, and you can read words really, really fast. And you can also search them by text, which is a format you understand. You can't search by voice because every person's voice is like different. If we both say the word JSON, it's going to sound different. So those transcribers are amazing. The information condensers for them are amazing, and it's still not enough, in my opinion. I just wanted to bring it up because it's a useful tool.
Yeah, I saw a video yesterday of ChatGPT summarizing a MKHD video live off the internet, just giving it a video and writing a summary of what the video is about and giving you just a nice little paragraph. I actually just tried to see if it would do it on one of my videos, but since it was using ChatGPT 3 to access it, it was not nearly as good as that. But I think that's because I'm not plugged into the right thing. I need to update my AI setup as soon as I get some time and get in there with some of the latest stuff from this week.
Well, that's something like, again, this is what I've been using, as you're saying, is that when I want to watch a YouTube video these days and I have a feeling it's going to be informational, valuable, or dense or whatever, I click a button, it goes to Readwise Reader, it pulls the transcript from the YouTube already generated the transcript, there's the button to do that. It then shows it as a document. It gives me the time in minutes it would take me to read that, so it tells me how much content is in it. And then I can use something called Ghostwriter to say, just give me the cliff notes, and it'll give me the 4-line explanation of what this is. So before I even begin it, I can go, what conclusion did they come to? And then if it's like a top 10 reasons for blah, 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 I could just say, give me the 10 reasons in a bullet point list, and then I can view it. And if I want more clarification, I don't even have to click the video. I can scroll through the transcription, find the part where they talk about that thing, click the line of text, and it'll start the video on that point in the video, open it full screen, and there I can do it. So like I already do this, and that's like without the complicated super AI integration stuff that's happening happening now. This is just what I already do to consume information. So I think the next step is going to be this idea of curated generative videos, which will take the information and actively like cut the video for you into a smaller video that shows you the kinds of content you want to see, that summarizes stuff, because people still prefer video content. There's a reason YouTube is as popular as it is. We just have to now find a way to reverse engineer that back. Long form becomes short form, to go back into long form, to go back into short form again. I think that's where this is all going to go.
That kind of reminds me of, I think the like CEO of OpenAI posted a tweet that said something like, you know, someone's going to like enter a prompt of, you know, write a formal email based on these bullet points, right? It generates the formal email is sent, and then the person who receives it basically says,
Summarizes
some bullet points.
Yep.
So
I have my AI talk to your AI.
Yeah, they'll work it out. When they've had a conversation, they'll get back to us.
don't have your AI talk to your girlfriend for you. I don't know if you guys saw that South Park episode yet.
Is that a new one?
You say that, but it worked. That's the whole point of the episode, right?
Well, it works up to a point, right? Until it goes wrong. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. It's the beginning is all the girls on the playground excited about how awesome and sweet Clyde is. And then Clyde in the hallway copy pasting her replies into Chat GPT, and
That is awesome.
and now I'm done with her shit. It's hilarious. Oh, but yeah, so we talked a little bit about this earlier, but maybe we'll just talk a few more minutes on it, and bringing up the non-digital aspects of what happens when it takes over, like manufacturing, driving, and basically all of the other things that are becoming possible. I don't know if you guys have seen the chat or the models hooked up to cameras now and vision sensors to go move shit around and pick things up. And I mean, it's only
that one
like
you can hover over a video and just like it cuts everything out of the video. Man, the amount of work I've done doing that before is so like rotoscoping in After Effects is a nightmare. Anybody who's ever had to do that long term, it is an absolute nightmare. And now you can just hover in real time over videos for rotoscoping. That is insane.
Yes. But do you guys think this is going to be a bigger problem, or about the same, or not a problem at all? I can see it being a huge issue. But I mean, maybe it's a US specific issue where it's going to hit a lot of industries that I can see very obviously getting hit.
Okay, so I'm just going to bring it up. There is an official document like brought up a research paper of the rate of exposure to AI. Exposure does not mean that you're getting replaced, that your job is getting replaced, that your job is getting harmed. It means AI enters the scene, and what happens next is up to how this industry decides the AI is going to be either useful, not useful, etc. So, AI that can look with a camera to a location, split out everything, is good for some things. For example, recognizing if there's a person inside, therefore do not use poison gas that makes like the floor cleaner or whatever. That was a really weird example. I have no idea why I came up with that. I just want to bring it up. There are tasks that can be decided based on what you can see. If there is stock on the shelf for specific products, if somebody moved the product to the wrong location, etc. Every industry can be impacted by this differently. For example, if you have a farm, you want to find out crops that are not in good state, so you can, say, handle them, cure them, whatever. If you have the shops, again, if products are in the wrong place, give somebody a notice or have a robot come in and take the thing, put it back in its proper location.
Or a bigger scale thing, if you got an Amazon warehouse and you got people picking things off of the shelves and putting them in, you can now have a robot do that efficiently.
Yeah, but the thing that I want to bring up, though, is in order for the AI to have any impact, it has to be present in the scene. Mm-hmm. So when we say, when the AI completely takes over manufacturing, self-driving, etc. industries, it means people decided that there was enough value for that to happen. So what happens? People are happy because they decided for that. That like, this is literally the industry deciding, hey, we want the AI doing that.
Right. Well, the people using the industry are the people who are driving the trucks or working in the manufacturing. If you don't want to, are now on unemployment and can't find another job.
But the thing is, if you don't want a self-driving car, just don't use a self-driving car. The non-self-driving cars exist. We're not going to run out of non-self-driving cars. If people don't want them, there will be people making them too.
Taxi drivers, those jobs.
Yeah, but again, like industries don't. They don't change overnight though. Like we are talking about generational things. Like we are talking about the idea that, like, anybody here who's ever worked in corporate knows there is still companies where their back end is running on Haskell and Fortran because it's just the way that, like, things don't change overnight just because the technology is improved. And if you've got entire ecosystems of entire processes and systems that use certain kinds of machinery and certain kinds of things, this isn't going to happen overnight. Now, it will happen. I don't disagree that this stuff is definitely coming, but the truth is that that's like saying, oh, did you hear the car industry completely destroyed the shoe rehorsing, the horse reshoeing industry? Like, yeah, of course it did, because that changed. But it didn't get rid of transport. It didn't get rid of people facilitating transport. It didn't get rid of all of the jobs that are now associated with that, and so on and so on. So, like, it really, if you're worried about a job disappearing, it might worry the people directly doing it now. And it probably won't affect them, but it'll affect their next generation. The people going into college are probably the ones in trouble.
It doesn't hold up as well though, because there you're replacing one industry with an industry that's even bigger and employs more people. Where here you're replacing one industry with one that employs robots and AI, so that whoever owns the company has maximal profits.
Well, let me ask you a very simple question. You personally, since AI has become popular, have you spent more or done more content in and around it, or less?
More.
Has it affected you? Yeah, more, right? So my point is, your interaction personally, both financially in terms of engaging with it, and content produced around it, and people consuming content about it, every single part of it, the human level has gone up as well as the AI level. So
but that's because it's changed drastically over the last 6 months.
Sure, exactly. And you're telling me that it's going to keep changing more drastically, but also it's not going to change drastically? Of course it is. That's the whole point. It's going to keep doing that, right? So if it's going to keep changing, so too will the subsequent jobs, the requirements, all of this other stuff is going to change alongside with it.
Right, but I'm saying the car and horse thing doesn't really hold up for me, because I don't see the analogy on AI taking these things over, where that still has some industry that is employing the same number of people, more people, or even anywhere near the number of people. If you replace all of the drivers, you've replaced the drivers. You didn't give them, they're not going from driving a carriage to driving a car, or working on building carriages to working on building cars. There's
but the
a
same
robot
people
that's building the cars, and a robot that's optimizing the AI, and maybe a small number of
you
people
could say
in tech
that
doing things.
the same people who were like literally using the horseshoes, like actually like making horseshoes and putting them on they're not the same people who were driving the cars, right? Like that structural system is exactly the same. It's and the same goes now, that you're right. The exact people who are presently driving a truck may not be the people.
But that switch created new industries and jobs where this one doesn't, I guess, is the point. Or at least the jobs that it's replacing, it's not. I haven't seen anybody explain the new ones that are at a larger scale, where the number of jobs in another industry is more than the number lost, and it's not. It seems like it's probably like a 5 or 10 to 1.
Okay, I think I see the disconnect here. A very simple question, and I think this sums up the difference that we have here. Do you think once AI becomes so mainstream that it can basically take over 80% of jobs, do you think more industries will be created to replace that, or that we're going to decline in kinds of jobs and kinds of work required?
I think that there will be a wider variety and a less number of them available. Less jobs to do, less work to do, less employment available. There might be. I think that as time goes by, there's just going to, of course, keep being more and more different things that people do. But I don't think
that's where we disagree then.
Scale.
Fundamentally, that's where we disagree, because historically, throughout time, every time some technology has been created, it has created more hunger for more things. So the point is, when you had horses traveling, people made roads. When roads could make you travel faster, we wanted trains. When we had trains traveling faster, now we wanted to go to different countries, so we had airplanes. The point is that, yes, I agree with you, but I don't think AI, even if AI takes over every single job we presently do as a human being, we are going to get so much greedier that the next step will be, now we need to have AI building prefabricated systems using 3D printers to build spaceships on Mars. And so now we're going to need thousands of people who know about how all this stuff works to start building interstellar space. So maybe the gap of requirement will get higher.
That's the problem.
Yeah, but the point is, it's going to keep going. And that's one industry that'll one change. Like, I truly believe once you go down this road, entire industries will spring up around every single aspect of this. Like the entire world will change. Like, if you were to tell me that the idea of somebody whose job it is to draw pixel art or draw art for, to go back to the clip art example, nobody would have thought that's a job. Oh, well, I draw cartoons, so I draw cartoons to sell them for hundreds of thousands to paper companies because they can't make their own for their magazines. Like, we have no concept of what the jobs are going to be, but there will be jobs that brand new, completely unheard of, based on the fact that whatever industry comes up next. Like, if you told me there was an industry in short form content, like, TikTok is nonsense. I mean, objectively, like, if you look at where the world has gone, like, look, if you were to tell somebody, if you go back in time 20 years and say, this is what people consume content, people would laugh at you. That's not how people's brains work. The idea of watching somebody play a video game was an actual joke 15 years ago. Now it is a billion-dollar industry. Like, they're $1 million at least. But the point is, like, the idea that there isn't going to be infinite more industries that happen as a result of AI taking over all of this stuff, it surprises me. Like, that's where we diverge. I think this is an explosion on, this is like creating the internet. The internet has replaced information. It's going to fundamentally, exponentially change the way we use information, and it's going to infinitely generate far more jobs than it ever destroys, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the thing that I want to bring up here for a while now is that the difference between you two is, Weimann, you're imagining the future with the technology of today. This is the problem. That information that we will have,
future with the politics of today and the governments and
the
businesses
information
of today.
of today, sure. But the thing is, information changes over time. We learn more. We learn how to adapt with the technology. It's been happening the entire time, and it's going to keep happening. And the hunger, as Story mentioned, is going to be there, and we are going to make more things, not less, because we have more time, because we delegated the time of the tasks that did not have value to something else. Like the time that we would have to use our feet to get from location A to B is now using cars instead.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, just to kind of sum it up, it'd be like, AI has the potential of enabling us to do things that we can't even conceive of today.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely does. I just think that it is going to completely screw a large number of people.
Displacement is happening. Yeah, I'm not saying displacement doesn't happen, but it's displacement. It's not removal.
I think it's more removal, because I'm not seeing these new things appear. I'm seeing every new thing I see appear is just a thing that replaces way more people, so that one dude that owns this automated thing can make all the money.
Okay, here's the problem with that. First off, humans give resources to other humans. We can agree on that, right? Like, you have a product, you're selling it, you're getting resources for selling the product, the other person gets the product, you get whatever you sold it for. This exists. This is like very basic, but this doesn't change that for the product to exist, somebody has to have made it. What? Are you two laughing?
But now the AI will make it.
Some good comments.
Oh, okay. Okay, no, I'm seeing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, somebody has to make it, unless they have a robot that makes it for them.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing here is, even if the person removes you from the equation, they have a robot, they ask it to make the product, they get the product, the robot got nothing because they already got the robot from somebody else. Somebody still has to make that robot. First off, you can say other robots will make that robot. There may be some self-sustaining loop of one person having all the robots and no one else having other robots, but that's not what's likely to happen. Everybody's going to have their own robots. Everybody is going to make their own stuff. They're just removing other people from the equation, but the person who got removed first is only displaced. Now they have free time, free cause in life or goal in life to do whatever they want. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. Change is hard. A lot of people say change is like traumatic.
But the end result of that isn't usually that they find a new thing. It's that they end up in poverty and with giant problems.
Not necessarily
that they adapt and go like, oh, I was driving trucks for 20 years and now I'm a doctor or an AI.
Okay, so here's the thing here. You can have someone training truck driving. Like that's something that AI still needs to get better at. There are jobs. Your job changes. This is the word.
Right, but the number of those jobs is in the hundreds, not in the hundreds of thousands.
So I think, just to be clear too, is that I do agree with what you're saying in this case, Jason, but the difference is the scope we're talking about. Even you are 100% right. There's a whole load of people who are doing jobs that can be replaced that will be just replaced, and they won't be able to reskill fast enough. They won't. There's lots of context that'll happen, but to me, to be brutally honest, the world goes through turmoils and upheavals on a semi-regular basis. I'm not looking at what's going to happen to one generation or two generations. I'm going to look at what happens by the time you get to 6 generations down the line. And a lot of this stuff will have cyclically changed to the point where colleges will change what their expectations are, base levels of education requirements will change, which you can say is a good or bad thing. But the idea that this will have some infinite cascading problem of homelessness or issues is insane to me, because every time history has done this, it has kept iterating to the point where it's changed. So I do, there will be, there's always turmoil when any big, like the Industrial Revolution changed the world for the better in most cases, but legitimately, you can read papers at the time. A lot of people were displaced. There's a lot of problems that happened around that time period, and a lot of lives were ruined. Industries changed. People's lost their jobs. This happens. Now, I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying factually, when something big changes, it does have a huge upheaval, and a lot of people will lose their livelihood and their whatever. But my point is, very quickly, the world adapts insofar as the next generation, the colleges need to have courses that appeal to what the companies want. So the next generation of kids have to learn different things than they thought they would go to college for. And so inside of 2 generations, new jobs are generated to fulfill, supplant the differences of the last ones. So it will affect a generation, maybe 2, but by the time you get to 3 generations, all of this stuff has moved on.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think overall, like the trajectory for the world is hopefully, it's probably good, barring like some super intelligent AI deciding that it only needs 1% of us around or something crazy, right? But I think overall it's good. I just think it's something that people need to be aware of and ready for. Like if you're in one of those situations where your job is getting, theoretically getting replaced, or you're doing engineering where your job is definitely changing and you need to start taking advantage of this stuff, I think that it's important that people know about it, think about it, and be ready for it, and don't just kind of miss out on it like a lot of people did with things like the internet. Oh yeah, the internet is not it's not going to change things. I think we all agree it's going to change things. I just we'll have to see how it ends up.
Just one final note here. Even if jobs are being displaced, and I'm not saying that it's not easy or etc. It's like, yes, it can be hard, but ChatGPT, as I said at the beginning, GPT just means generative pre-trained transformer, which means it doesn't know what the hell it's saying, doesn't understand anything, doesn't even know you, doesn't even know your context. All it knows is predicting the next word. It doesn't have critical thinking yet. It doesn't have anything that resembles critical thinking yet. So the human mind is still valuable. You can still find something to do. Adaptation is literally in human nature. There is safety to be found.
There is a robot off screen with a weapon aimed at your eye, by the way, making him say all this stuff is read right off of the teleprompter.
No. Why are you like this?
Well, the reason that particular problem doesn't bother me.
Totally correct, to be honest. I just want to play a little devil's advocate, but I hope that all 3 of you are dead on, and I think you probably are. I'm always terrible at predicting things. I expected I would have VR sunglasses by now, so don't take my predictions for anything more than the crap that they are.
Also, it kind of surprises me.
GPT instead, you're being replaced.
A couple of the comments were alluding to the idea that what I'm saying sounds like I think it's a utopia. I really don't think so. I think all of this is a very detrimental thing to human interaction. It's like I think this is a bad thing. Now, I say a bad thing in terms of it's a bad thing for people, for human beings with each other. I just think it's, like I said, people are putting their fears in the hilariously wrong places. They think it's going to collapse the economy. Now, there is going to be massive upheaval, and there will probably be huge dips in stock market. There'll be lots of, I won't say it won't collapse some economies, but the point is that the idea of people, that's where their fear is, just surprises the hell out of me. When the real trend, in my opinion, that you should be paying attention to is how cynical human beings are as a species. That as time has gone by, we have started to distrust each other more, communication less, like all of this stuff, like the amount of stuff that's happened. If you're going to worry about the dangers of where technology and AI is going, Like, it just feels to me that the energy is in all the wrong places. Don't be afraid of losing jobs. Being afraid of the fact that it might legitimately be more compelling to sit in your room alone talking to AI than to another human being in less than 4 years. And if that's the case, what will that do to humanity? That's an infinitely bigger problem, that you could basically just live off AI-generated super farms that can produce food you can inject into your arm. You can just live in a computer for the rest of your life. And the fact that that's not a dystopia technically, because it could legitimately be a better lifestyle, factually speaking. Now, I'm not saying it's the case, but that's like, to me, like, this is where things are more interesting, because this is where the next generation of sci-fi is going to go. It's like, what are the theoretical worlds we could live in as a result of this?
Yeah, in regards to the emotional processing of working with AI, like in the future, like the idea of just sitting in a room is, we're absolutely not built for that. There is Healthy Gamer GG, I think, on YouTube, psychiatrist talking about a lot of very nuanced topics in regards to mental health, has said something very important that I'd like to bring up here, which is like, humans were not designed with the idea of maintaining stress long term. In the past, you would like go in the forest, there would be a tiger, your stress would go up, you'd run away from the tiger, you'd think, oh, I just ran from a tiger, I need to eat. Like, your entire body would be built for very short stress levels, very short resolves of that stress. And this is not what is happening in the modern industry right now. If we have stress like rent, etc., it's a long-term stress. This is like what can cause a lot of problems because our bodies are not adapted to dealing with those levels of stress. And social connections were like very good for us for like the entire existence of the human species, but we're getting less and less of that because everything is being connected more, everything is like getting less freedom to be its own like society. There are less people getting their own small societies, and this is going to affect how we like live. And when AI becomes more useful, we see less value like in human conversation in regards to information. And right now it's trying to enter the entertainment industry, which is something that scares me because, like, again, personalized data, you may be happy, but can people stop bringing up my name in the comments? Because like every time you guys start looking at that, I'm starting to look at that, and I cannot maintain my lack of smile. Just from
Everyone's
looking at the
watching your
comments.
eyes, your eye.
Yeah, I'm trying not to blink. Okay.
Don't do it.
Bring yourself the character.
Oh god, what are you guys doing to me? This is the AI revolution, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So the thing I wanted to bring up, I completely agree with you, Jason. I think it's going to be a very experimental phase for human society to try and figure out how to deal with the effects of using AI replacing human values in terms of society. God, it sounds way too generic.
Sorry, this was the app that you were using?
Yes, yeah. So this
People
was
that
just
work
a side note. A few people were asking. Many times I have very similar conversations where people ask me a lot of similar topics. And so at one stage I got a bit frustrated, kind of going, I have literally talked about singletons at least for an hour somewhere at some point in the last 4 years, and if I'm asked again to repeat my thoughts on it, which haven't changed, it's going to kill me. And so at some point I wanted to find a way to solve this problem, and what this lets you do is type in a YouTube channel, or actually just vaguely YouTube in general, though my recommendation is specifically tailor it to whatever channel you want, and then type in a word, and if that word is said in the transcript of any of the videos, it will jump you to the timestamp of that video at that location, which is really useful for me, where it's like, I remember at some point I talked about the strategy pattern. I could find every time I talked about the strategy pattern and link people directly to that portion of that video. So it's very useful.
Interesting. I have to try this thing out. There we go. Find some strategy pattern videos.
While you're doing that, one last thing, I think it's a fun comment. It's come up a few times too. A few people do the classic joke of if you talk about existential fear, the common joke these days is the Rick and Morty one, where you've got the butter robot. It's like, what is my purpose? To pass butter. And it's like, oh my God, right? Where it's like, this is my only purpose in life. Now, here's my question to all of you. Is that really, think about it, that creature, that little robot, has a very defined life purpose that is achievable within its lifetime. It's a very small goal that it can do for the rest of its life. I think it is far more of an existential horror the fate of humanity, where we actually have no purpose. Technically, there's no specific mark or milestone that we have to do or have to achieve. We have to make up our own as we go. So for all the people using that as a metric or marker for the idea of this abstract sense of fear of self or whatever, I would say the life of something with a very set objective and goal is actually much clearer and maybe a simpler life to live. So, there you go.
Well, before I answer your question, Weimann, just do me a quick favor. Change this to the philosopher show. We've been predicting the future here. We're talking about the causes and nihilism, existentialism.
Hey, it's better than suggesting job tips for the 500th time. Come on, I don't mind having at least some more of a different conversation.
Yeah, I think this is definitely different and interesting. I wanted to share this site too. They sent me a link yesterday, and I was checking it out, and it's a little bit interesting, just on the AI stuff. Another one, I don't know if you guys have seen this. It was scenario.com. I haven't really played with it much.
I've not seen this one.
But it looks like it's supposed to be generating stuff for games. So my understanding is that it's generating like game assets, removing backgrounds, and doing those types of things. So I didn't play with it a little bit, but I figured I'd drop a link in there since we're chatting about AI stuff anyway. I don't know if it does 3D things or not, though. I was kind of curious. Oh, and then oh yeah,
Dave's
so
had some
we
zingers.
have a question.
Dave's had some zingers in the chat today.
Yeah, story. Warped imagination would like to know how to get a job.
You can't. You're blackballed. I've talked to everybody. You're not allowed a job.
You can't have the name Dave, otherwise, yeah. So, I think I'm out of topics. I don't know. Do you guys have any more AI stuff you wanted to mention or talk about before we wrap things up?
I mean, I've a million things I've been writing down, but I have a feeling I'd give your eye an aneurysm, so I guess we'd probably maybe call it quits on some of this stuff.
I mean, have your fun. I mean, who needs a no aneurysm anyways?
No aneurysm. Oh, oops, didn't mean to push that button. Well, before we do go, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows about the time travel bundle. It's on sale on the asset store. I don't know if you guys saw it, but the first two tiers were not too exciting for me, but the third tier actually had a lot of really cool assets. So I grabbed it. I don't know if anybody else, I think it's only like $30 though, for the entire pack, had a bunch of stuff. And then GameDev Guild, next Saturday, not tomorrow, but next Saturday, we're going to have the pre-event mixer thing. And I think one of the topics that I really want to have there is maybe like a little round table on AI. I want to see if maybe Lucian's up for it, and maybe Jason. I don't know if you're going to come join and chat about AI stuff. I feel like we just have a nice, good hour conversation about the state of it. And Chris did his whole like PhD dissertation stuff on AI and machine learning, so he's very big on it. And we'll probably find one other person who's really into that too. Might be a fun conversation. So I'll link that down below. And then I don't know. Was there anything else I wanted to?
I think we've let the people wait long enough. I got
you beat me to it. I was going to say. There's an announcement I've been waiting on.
He has a big announcement. Well, first, before you announce it, you did do a video today, right, or yesterday?
Not a video. I just actually did. We talked about this. I did a blog post because I did a couple months back. I did my full like ECS 1.0 full project tutorial video. You might have seen it. It's the one with like the zombies in the graveyard and they go like attack a brain in the middle. So the ECS API has been updated a couple of times since then, and it kind of like breaks some of the things in there. All the concepts are basically still the same, but just like some of the implementation details have changed. So I basically created a blog post just detailing what all those changes are, and I can get you a link for that here.
Yeah, send over a link.
Well, Johnny's doing that, I will say, because Johnny knows what he's doing his talk on. I still don't know what I'm doing my talk on yet, so I'm still thinking about it. So if anybody has any suggestions of what they would like to hear me talk about, let me know, and I'll make it. I do have it now. It's not to say I haven't had some planning. I've got a very large brainstorming board of stuff, and I just haven't quite settled anything. But if you think something that interests you, drop it in the chat, and I might pick that. So any suggestions, fire away.
Yeah, I've got a couple ideas if nobody else does.
Yeah, and in case it matters to anybody, I'll be there too, likely for a roundtable talk about state machine behaviors and other animation tips and hacks in Unity, because there's a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah. Yorai is a wealth of knowledge on that stuff too, and it's really interesting. It's stuff that I think a lot of people should know about and don't even it doesn't even cross their minds. I feel like so it would be super interesting.
That still endlessly surprises me, by the way. Like, I had a meeting with a group of devs last week before, and I brought up search tools in Unity, and they hadn't heard of half of them. Like, literally didn't know the label system, the menu system, the control case search. They didn't know the filter. It's like, whoa, okay, I didn't like. That's not a judgment on any individual person, because a lot of these devs have been doing it since Unity 5. So when new features come in, they have no reason to know these new tools have been randomly placed, because Unity does a terrible job of surfacing new tools. So a lot of people genuinely don't know what's available in the engine.
Yeah, so there is something I actually want to bring up here, which is a lot of people know how the engine looks, but they don't remember the specifics of what each button is on the actual interface, which is the thing that surprises me the most, because in the animation tools, there is this one button that is like completely within the line of sight of every developer who ever worked with an animator controller, and yet nobody knows what I'm talking about. Add behavior to an animation state, which is like, it's insane to me that it's there in the UI, yet nobody ever crosses their mind to like look at that. And I've started like presenting a challenge of describing to me every single button in the Unity interface depending on certain windows. Even I fail at some of these, but at least like I crossed over them once and I actually pressed them to see what they do.
Well, there's ones that I think are more, I'd say, for lack of a better word, critical, as in like they fundamentally change your workflow. Like one that Dave did a video on that honestly I've never seen another developer ever use in my entire life in Unity, is the fact that you can have presets configured based on a search filter, so that when you drag an audio source or a script onto an object, it will not just fill out the values, but it'll fill out the values based on the fact that it is a foreground or a background or whatever. So like that feature was something that I learned in that video, and then subsequently went, oh yeah, I do this all of the time. That like whenever there's a foreground thing or a background thing, there's something that is like, there's a general preset I would apply. And so that particular example, like there's features in the engine that are fundamental, you would use every day if you knew they were there, but people don't actually know they're there. So those ones I think interest me the most, because they're like the amount of manual work I see being done. Like, very small thing. I saw a document 4 weeks ago, no, 4 or 5 weeks ago, where somebody wrote a document of saying, when we import assets, name it like this and turn off this checkbox if it happens to be of this format type. And then I wrote a preprocessor that did that every single time something came in that had that filtered name and did the checkbox. So again, from a knowledge-based perspective, this was now something that was enshrined in a knowledge-based document that artists are telling each other, by the way, remember to do this very obscure thing every time you do this thing. And it's like, well, we could just code that out immediately. Just one line, just preset the default thing. So yeah, to your point, there is a lot of people don't know a lot of stuff about the engine, but what fascinates me is how much they don't know about things that are actively part of their day. They're like, they literally use this every day, and they're like, there's a process you do every day you could literally cut out entirely. You could just automate this entirely every single day, just with like 4 lines of code.
Yeah, I'm constantly learning new stuff. I got a video maybe tomorrow on Unite, or not Unite, GDC and Unity, and part of it, one of the things I had to call out there were the things that I didn't know already existed that I discovered at GDC accidentally that weren't released there, that had been out for a while. I just happened to stumble on them either in a talk, in a presentation, or writing code for a demo that I was working on. Stumbled across another one. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. There's definitely a lot there, though. The engine changes constantly, and there's so much there.
There's 2 things I want to bring up here. One, in JSON story server, there's a lot of conversation where people make jokes about how I read all the documentation. The reason I read it is because I don't want to be caught in situations where like there's something that would change my life and I don't know. And the other thing I want to bring up is that I also read patch notes as the engine changes, because like going to school and getting grade A, B, C, D, E, F, etc., the information builds up. systems get more complex. If you've ever played a game for a long time and they keep adding mechanics, and then a new player comes in and they're overwhelmed with mechanics, this is the exact same thing that happens. But game dev is my job, so I want to know how things happen and not stay back a grade and get overwhelmed. This is why it's important to read things. You learn a lot of new tools, and right now this is also happening with AI. We are learning prompt engineering and all the concepts of like the AI not even knowing us, etc. Only because we've been here for the ride. There are a lot of people who are not going to be there for the ride, not adaptive, not learning the things as they go, and they're just going to have to catch up. And catching up is going to be easier because there's going to be constructed material to get people started with AI, etc., etc. But they're still going to have to do a lot more in a small amount of time.
So, Johnny, I want to give you a second to talk about this dots tutorial real quick.
Yeah, I mean, it actually kind of tags along onto what Yorai was just saying about, change logs and keeping up to date on everything. So, after you watch my 2.5 hour long tutorial, you can read through a 3,000 word blog post to give you all the updates to fix everything. But no, all that being said, the changes are really not all that difficult. It's kind of just mostly like changing out different types. You can kind of scroll through and just get like a kind of like overview of what I did. But I basically just like said, here's kind of like what the previous line in the code is. We just need to change it to that. And also just provided some extra context about, why we're doing each of these different things and what some of these new concepts mean here. So yeah, that's just kind of some general project stuff. And then here's where we actually get into like some of the code. Again, most of it's just like changing data types because like some of them are now outdated and they're...
I see one of the method names was damaged brain, so I guess you were reading the documentation that Unity provided.
Truth.
On that note, there was also a recent Unity blog post regarding dots hitting 1.0 and a lot of changes and functionality that have been there, including the mixed mode, play mode, etc. Those are tools that will change your life if you're working with dots. Stuff that everybody should know. Have you shown that in your video?
Hadn't. I mean, I've kind of like hit on it in passing, but I haven't done any like dedicated things on it.
So there you go. I'm waiting for the video now.
I'm sure it'll come soon. All right. So everybody who isn't subscribed, where do we go? We're all in a weird position there. Should go subscribe to Johnny right now. Make sure that you hit subscribe. And also, if you haven't hit the thumbs up on this video, you should probably do that as well. I also really quickly wanted to share the other video that I just released. I guess it's been out for about an hour now. I queued it up terribly, not knowing how long we were going to talk, and I forgot to move it. So go check that out if you're curious about the game. I think that you should probably play it if you like League of Legends style games or strategy games or kind of card games and that tactic style game. I would definitely recommend checking it out. I'm not just saying it because I know the guys and interviewed them, but it was actually a lot of fun. Have fun building teams and playing it. So I would definitely go check it out and then watch the video if you're curious about how to build some stuff like that are really different and interesting kind of mindset and setup for how they did it. And I thought it was worth watching. Or I thought it was a fun chat and I learned some stuff. So I think it was worthwhile. And the time travel bundle still up and Game Dev Guild next week will be the first thing we'll be live. So anybody got any last second stuff? Oh,
can I announce my topic?
What's that,
Yeah,
Johnny?
so
can I announce my topic?
Johnny's still got to give us the topic.
I was kind of playing it up at the beginning, but I thought Jason was actually going to cut the stream off before I could say it here. Okay, so seriously, the theme of this talk is going to be modular data-oriented design. So of course, with dots, one of the kind of primary draws to it is high performance and everything like that, and that's something that everyone kind of focuses on, and that's all great and all. But I kind of want to focus on more of the aspects of it being modular, how you can easily change things out, add new features and complexity without completely breaking everything. Of course, you can probably put something together in an object-oriented approach, but just structuring your stuff in a data-oriented way where the data is separated from the systems, it just lends itself really nicely to do those kinds of things. So want to showcase just kind of some overall concepts on that and go into a couple practical examples. I got some cool things planned out for it. So I'm really excited about this talk.
It sounds really exciting. It sounds very different from the normal dot stuff too. So it's gonna be really cool.
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
absolutely love to see your take on that, and also like comparing that to the official Unity solutions and seeing how you improved upon it. Yeah.
And before we go, Yorai, you'd called out this question. I want to make sure that we pop it up. Do we know if any AAA studios incorporate ChatGPT? Are they already doing it? Do you guys know of any? I can think of one that's loosely using it, but I don't know that the whole company is.
So I don't know the details about this, but Ubisoft did announce that they have like Ghostwriter, a project to use AI with writing for their games. And the GitHub Copilot X advertisements that are going on right now for usage of it say that developers are becoming way faster when they're using it. So yeah, it does reduce production time significantly. Just watch those to see the actual impacts they have, like percents and the likes.
And something Yorai said earlier too that's really important to bring up is there have been issues already with these training models often retain the information for further training, and so corporations are really skittish about people typing in their raw information into this stuff because they have trade secrets and blah blah blah. So what you're going to see more of is companies are probably going to be using AI, but they're not going to be using ChatGPT. They'll be training something internal for whatever they're doing, and they probably won't even tell you they're doing it, right? So that it's not going to be, unless it's marketable to do so, they're probably not going to tell you.
I think it was Samsung that had an issue with like information leaks from using ChatGPT, and they're working on their own internal solution. It may be wrong on the company name. It's something regarding that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess we'll wrap it there. I did want to mention, because I forgot, I have started adding a little bit of AI content to some of my coursework as well, including the most recent lesson, because I found that it's extremely helpful for doing things like writing code you're not sure about or debugging and tracking down issues. So in the most recent example, it's showing why does this code not work, having it explain and going through the fixes with it. I think that it's one of the most useful things, especially for new programmers getting started, being able to say, hey, I want this code to do this thing, but it's doing this instead. Can you tell me how to fix it? And then being able to kind of understand and learn from it what it's doing and what it's changing, because it'll give you that new code and then show you the differences. So I'm going to call that out. And then I guess remind everybody again to go subscribe to Johnny's channel, subscribe to Story's channel, which I assume we'll be getting some content soon. And any day now, Yorai is going to be creating something, right? Right?
No. You can ask ChatGPT to imagine and hallucinate content based on my.
We're going to generate it.
Yeah.
I'll wait for 5 and I'll say, please create me a Yorai channel and load it up with content about state machines.
Jesus Christ.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and share. Drop a comment if you got any thoughts, questions, you want us to talk about something totally different, or you liked what we talked about today. And I guess we'll see you next week. Yeah, next week's good.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.